Vegeta understood this in the moment his space pod's emergency systems failed, when the viewport showed nothing but endless sand stretching to a horizon that shimmered with heat mirages, no cities, no power signatures, no technology worth the name. The pod had torn through some kind of spatial anomaly during his gravity training. One moment he'd been pushing his body to 500 times Earth's gravity. The next, his instruments screamed warnings about dimensional folding and impossible physics before everything went dark. The crash landing had been controlled enough. Saiyan reflexes and his own Ki shielding absorbed the impact that would have liquefied a human. But when the hatch blew and the heat rolled in, Vegeta felt something he rarely experienced: surprise. The air was a furnace, not the comfortable burn of a 300 gravity chamber or the explosive heat of a final flash at full power, but a dry, relentless assault that pulled moisture from his skin with every breath. The twin suns, hung in a sky so blue it hurt to look at, and the sand reflected their light like billions of tiny mirrors. Vegeta floated above his ruined pod, Ki crackling around him in a white aura as he scanned the horizon. His scouter had been destroyed in the crash, but a Saiyan prince didn't need technology to sense power. He extended his awareness outward, searching for any significant energy signature. Nothing. No cities, no warriors, no challengers, just endless empty desert and movement. Deep beneath the sand, something massive stirred. The vibration reached him even in the air, a rhythmic pulse that suggested a creature of incomprehensible size. Vegeta's lips curved into a predatory smirk. At least this wasteland had something worth fighting. But first, he needed information. The pod's computer had logged something before it died. Coordinates, stellar cartography, atmospheric composition. Vegeta dropped back to the wreckage and yanked out the data core with one hand, crumpling the reinforced housing like paper. The screen flickered, showing fragmentary data. Planet designation, Arrakis atmospheric composition, nitrogen, oxygen, trace moisture. Stellar system, Canopus, population, classified political status, Imperial Fief, House Atreides primary, export, melange, spice. Vegeta crushed the data core and tossed it aside. Politics. Exactly the kind of tedious weakness Kakarot would waste time navigating. A Saiyan prince didn't concern himself with feudal hierarchies or planetary governors. He conquered or he moved on. The heat intensified. Vegeta noticed something odd. He was sweating, not from exertion but from simple exposure. On Earth, even in deserts, his Saiyan physiology regulated temperature effortlessly. Here, the dryness was so extreme that moisture evaporated before it could cool his skin. His throat felt scratchy, annoying. He lifted into the air again, accelerating to supersonic speed in a heartbeat. The sonic boom scattered sand in a massive plume. Behind him, as he streaked across the desert, searching for civilization, mountains appeared on the horizon, a massive rock formation that looked like a wall bisecting the desert. Vegeta adjusted his trajectory, aiming for the highest peak. That's when he saw them. Massive aircraft with insect-like wings, primitive but functional, flying in formation near the rock wall. Vegeta slowed, floating a kilometer above them, watching. The craft descended towards something that made him pause, a mobile industrial complex crawling across the sand like a mechanical beast, tubes and machinery extracting something from the desert itself. Then the ground erupted. The creature that burst from the sand made even Vegeta's eyes widen. Easily, 300 meters long, a segmented worm with a mouth like a cavern, ringed with crystalline teeth. The industrial crawler tried to flee. But the worm was impossibly fast for something so massive, swallowing half the machine in one bite. The aircraft scattered. One of them took damage from flying debris and spiraled toward the sand, trailing smoke. Vegeta moved on instinct. He appeared beside the falling craft in a burst of speed, his hand gripping the hull. The metal groaned under the sudden stop, but he controlled the descent with precision, setting the aircraft down on a rocky outcrop rather than the sand. The hatch opened. A man in a strange desert suit stumbled out, eyes hidden behind dark goggles. When he removed them, Vegeta saw something impossible. The man's eyes were entirely blue. Not blue irises, but completely blue, like someone had replaced his eyes with sapphires. "You..." The man breathed, speaking in a language Vegeta shouldn't understand, but somehow did. "You stopped us from falling. You flew. No suspensors, no wings. You just flew." More aircraft descended, landing nearby. Men and women emerged, all wearing the same desert suits, all with those strange blue eyes. They moved with the efficiency of trained warriors, forming a defensive perimeter while staring at Vegeta with a mixture of awe and suspicion. An older man approached, lean and weathered, with the bearing of a commander. "I am Stilgar, Naib of Sietch Tabr. You saved Chani's life." He gestured to a young woman whose blue eyes studied Vegeta with unsettling intensity. "The Fremen do not forget water debts. What is your name, Outworlder?" "Vegeta." He crossed his arms, looking at each of them in turn. Warriors, certainly. Their movements suggested combat training, and the weapons at their sides, curved knives and peculiar rifles, were worn with familiarity. "Prince Vegeta, and I don't need your gratitude." "Prince?" Stilgar's weathered face showed curiosity. "Of what great house?" "The Saiyan race." Vegeta's voice carried absolute certainty. "The greatest warrior people in the universe." Murmurs rippled through the gathered Fremen. One of them, a scarred fighter with suspicious eyes, stepped forward. "The universe? You claim much, Outworlder. This universe belongs to the Imperium, the Great Houses, and the Guild. I see no Saiyan delegation in the Landsraad." Vegeta's ki flared slightly, a visible aura of white energy crackling around him. Every Fremen's hand went to their weapons. "I don't know what a Landsraad is, and I don't care. I crashed here by accident. Once I repair my ship, I'll leave your desert to whatever petty politics occupy your time." "The deep desert is death," Stilgar said quietly. "Even for one who flies, water is life on Arrakis. Without it, even the strongest warrior becomes dust." He paused, studying Vegeta with eyes that had seen decades of survival. "You are powerful, this is clear, but Arrakis respects no strength except the strength to survive. Come with us to the Sietch. We will give you water and shelter. In return, you will tell us how you flew, and why you fell from the sky like a comet." Vegeta's first instinct was to refuse. He served no one, accepted charity from no one, and certainly didn't answer questions from desert dwellers who didn't know what a Saiyan was. But his throat was dry, uncomfortably so, and the heat continued its relentless assault. Even hovering in the air, he felt his body losing moisture at an alarming rate. Strategic retreat wasn't surrender. It was tactical assessment. "Fine," Vegeta said, landing on the rock beside them. "But understand this. I am not your subject, your ally, or your friend. I'm a warrior prince who needs information, nothing more." Stilgar's face showed something that might have been a smile. "Then you will fit well with the Fremen, Vegeta of the Saiyan. We too serve no one but ourselves, and Shai Hulud. Come, the desert grows hot, and we have much to discuss." As Vegeta followed them to their aircraft, he noticed the sandworm had disappeared back beneath the dunes, leaving only ripples in the sand. Something about the creature nagged at him. The sheer size, the speed, the perfect adaptation to this brutal environment. Whatever this planet was, it had survived by being stronger than anything that tried to conquer it. Vegeta allowed himself a small smirk. Finally, a worthy challenge. The Fremen ornithopter climbed into the burning sky, its insect wings beating with mechanical precision. Vegeta stood in the cargo hold rather than sitting, arms crossed, studying his hosts with the tactical assessment of a warrior who'd conquered planets. The aircraft's interior smelled of recycled air, machine oil, and something else. A cinnamon scent that seemed to permeate everything. Chani, the young woman whose craft he'd saved, sat across from him. Her blue within blue eyes never left his face, and Vegeta found the scrutiny irritating. He'd fought gods and emperors who looked at him with more fear and less curiosity. "You don't wear a still suit," she observed, her voice carrying the accent of someone who chose words carefully. On the open sand, a man loses a thimbleful of moisture with each breath. Without a still suit, you would be dead in hours. "I've survived in vacuum," Vegeta replied flatly. "Your dessert doesn't impress me." "The desert impresses no one," Stilgar said from the pilot's seat, his hands moving across controls that looked primitive by Capsule Corp standards. "It simply kills those who don't respect it. You are strong. I saw you stop Chani's craft with one hand, but strength means nothing to thirst." The scarred warrior who'd spoken earlier, Jamis, Vegeta had heard him called, leaned forward. "He bears no Chris knife, no maker hooks. He knows nothing of the worm's way or the water discipline. Perhaps he fell from the sky as a gift to Shai Hulud. The great worm must feed." Vegeta's eyes snapped to Jamis. "You're suggesting I'd make good bait? Try it. I'll show you exactly what a Saiyan does to insects who challenge him." The temperature in the cargo hold seemed to drop despite the external heat. Jamis's hand moved to his belt, where a milky white blade hung in a sheath. Other Fremen shifted, ready for violence. "Jamis." Stilgar's voice carried absolute authority. "This outworlder saved Chani's life. He is under the water debt until we reach the Sietch. Challenge him there if you must, but not in my thopter." Jamis settled back, but his eyes promised future conflict. Vegeta filed the warrior away as a potential sparring partner, assuming these people were worth the effort. The flight continued in tense silence. Vegeta watched through the viewports as the desert passed below, endless and unchanging. No cities, no infrastructure, no signs of civilization beyond the occasional rock formation. What kind of people lived in such desolation by choice? "Tell me about this planet," Vegeta said finally. "Your technology is primitive, but you're organized. Military structure, discipline. You're not savages." Stilgar glanced back, surprised by the question. "Arrakis is the most important planet in the universe, Outworlder. Only here grows the spice melange. Without it, the Guild navigators cannot fold space. Without the Guild, there is no interstellar travel. The Imperium would collapse. Whoever controls Arrakis controls the spice. Whoever controls the spice controls the universe." Vegeta's interest sharpened. "This spice is a resource, something that grants power." "The spice extends life," Chani said. "Expands consciousness. Guild navigators use it to see safe paths through space. The Bene Gesserit Sisterhood uses it to enhance their abilities. Even common merchants pay fortunes for a handful. And it exists nowhere else in the known universe. Only here, in the deep desert." where Shai Hulud makes his home. The worm creates your valuable resource? Vegeta processed this information rapidly. A single-source strategic material that enabled space travel. Every faction would fight to control it. Classic territorial warfare, though the stakes were apparently galactic. Then whoever controls the worms controls everything. Shai Hulud cannot be controlled, Stilgar said, and there was something like reverence in his voice. The great maker is god and monster both. We ride the worms, but we do not command them. They are Arrakis, and Arrakis is them. The ornithopter banked suddenly, descending toward what looked like solid rock. Vegeta's enhanced vision caught the deception. A camouflaged opening in a cliff face, barely visible against the desert stone. The aircraft slipped through the gap into darkness, and suddenly they were in a massive cavern lit by glow globes that cast everything in amber light. The Sietch. Vegeta's tactical mind cataloged everything as they landed. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, living in interconnected caves, water catchment systems, growing areas with plants he didn't recognize, children playing in corridors, warriors training with those curved knives. It was a military encampment disguised as a civilian settlement, or perhaps the reverse. Every person he saw had those blue eyes, and every one of them moved with the efficiency of someone who wasted nothing. Not motion, not words, not water. The Thopter settled on a landing pad carved from rock. Stilgar stood, gesturing for Vegeta to follow. Welcome to Sietch Tabor, home of the Fremen of the deep desert. Here water is shared among brothers and sisters. Here the old ways are kept, and here strangers are tested. They emerged into the Sietch proper, and immediately Vegeta was aware of being watched. Fremen warriors lined the corridors, studying him with those unsettling eyes. Children peered from doorways. Elders observed from alcoves. Word of the flying outworlder had apparently spread quickly. Stilgar led them deeper into the Sietch, through corridors that smelled of humanity, spice, and recycled air. They entered a large chamber where water dripped from a catch basin into a central pool. An obscene display of wealth in this desert, Vegeta realized. Around the pool sat the Sietch's council, old warriors, wise women, and one young man who made Vegeta pause. The young man stood as they entered. He was slight, almost frail-looking, with dark hair and the same blue eyes as the others. But something about him set Vegeta's instincts on edge. The way he moved suggested coiled power, and his gaze held a weight that reminded Vegeta uncomfortably of Supreme Kai, someone who saw more than they should. Paul Muad'Dib, Stilgar said with clear respect. This is the Outworlder I spoke of through the radio. He calls himself Vegeta, Prince of the Saiyan. Paul stepped forward, studying Vegeta with unnerving intensity. I saw you in the visions, he said quietly, falling from the sky like a star, but the futures branched wildly around you. In some you die in the desert within days. In others you change everything. In still others... He paused, and something like concern crossed his face. In others, you break the golden path entirely. Vegeta had no idea what the boy was talking about, but he recognized the sound of prophecy when he heard it. Kakarot had dealt with fortune-tellers and oracles. Vegeta dealt with reality. I don't believe in destiny. Neither did I, Paul replied, until I drank the water of life and saw every possible future stretching before me like paths through the desert. You're an anomaly, Vegeta. You shouldn't exist in any of the futures I've seen. Yet here you stand. An elderly woman with a weathered face stepped forward. I am Reverend Mother Ramallo. I have lived 80 years in the Sietch, and served the Sayadana for 60 of them. I have never seen the like of you, Outworlder. Stilgar says you flew without wings or suspensors, that you caught a falling ornithopter with your bare hands, that you radiate visible energy like a personal shield. Her eyes narrowed. What are you? A Saiyan warrior, Vegeta said simply, the finest fighter in my universe. Your universe? Paul's eyes widened. You're not from the Imperium, not from the Scattering. You're from outside, beyond the known galaxy? Vegeta's patience with questions was wearing thin. I was training when my pod intersected some kind of spatial anomaly. Your guild, or whatever you call it, probably uses similar technology for travel. The transition dumped me here. He looked around the chamber at the assembled Fremen. I need to repair my ship and leave, that's all. The deep desert has your ship now, Stilgar said. By morning it will be buried under sand or scavenged by Harkonnen patrols. Either way, it's lost. Vegeta's ki flared slightly, a white aura flickering around him. Fremen hands went to weapons, but he ignored them. Then I'll find another way off this planet. Someone has ships. Someone has the technology. The Spacing Guild has ships, Paul said carefully, but they serve only those who pay in spice or political favor. The great houses have ships, but they're watched by the Guild, and the Harkonnens control Arrakis orbit under Imperial sanction. He paused. You're trapped here, Vegeta, at least for now. Trapped. The word ignited something dark in Vegeta's chest. He'd been imprisoned before, by Frieza, by Babidi, by his own weaknesses. Every time, he'd broken free through sheer power and will. This would be no different. Then I'll take a ship, Vegeta said flatly. Point me to whoever has one, and I'll handle the rest. Jamis laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You think you can simply take from the Harkonnens? From the Guild? You know nothing, Outworlder. This is not a world where strength alone matters. Politics, water, spice, these are the true powers here. Vegeta turned to face Jamis fully. Where I come from, strength is the only thing that matters. Everything else is just words used by the weak to control the strong. Then you will die quickly on Arrakis, Jamis said, stepping forward. Or perhaps you are not as strong as you claim. Perhaps you are just another soft off-worlder who will bleed water when the crysknife finds your throat. Is that a challenge? Vegeta's voice dropped to something dangerous. It is Tahadi, Stilgar interjected quickly. The challenge to the death. Jamis, this is necessary, Jamis finished. This outsider brings disruption. He does not respect our ways. He speaks of taking what he wants through force, alone. Let him prove his strength in the CH circle, or let him be silent. Vegeta smiled, not pleasantly. Finally, something he understood. Not politics or prophecies or water debt, but simple, direct combat. A challenge that could be answered with fists and power. I accept, Vegeta said. Paul stepped forward, his voice urgent. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. Tahadi is a death duel. The winner lives. The loser's water goes to the tribe. I've fought in tournaments where planets were the prize, Vegeta replied, never taking his eyes off Jamis. Death matches are nothing new. So be it, Stilgar said heavily. At sunset, in the gathering place, Tahadi challenge between Jamis and the Outworlder Vegeta. May Shai Hulud guide the blade. As the council dispersed to prepare, Chani approached Vegeta. Jamis is the finest knife fighter in the CH. He's killed 12 men in Tahadi challenges, and you don't even carry a blade. Vegeta glanced at her. I don't need one. Her blue eyes studied him for a long moment. Then to his surprise, she smiled, just slightly. Perhaps the visions were right about you after all, Vegeta of the Saiyan. Perhaps you will change everything." "I just want off this planet," Vegeta muttered. But as he stood in the sietch, feeling the weight of 1,000 blue eyes upon him, he had the distinct impression that leaving Arrakis was going to be far more complicated than he'd anticipated. The Fremen gave Vegeta a small chamber carved from rock, barely larger than a training capsule, with a sleeping mat, a basin for water, and a single glow globe casting amber light. They also gave him something they called a still suit, laying it on the mat with the reverence others might show a sacred relic. Vegeta examined the garment with disdain. It looked like a full-body rubber suit with tubes, filters, and a peculiar mask arrangement. The Fremen woman who'd delivered it, not Chani, but an older woman named Hara, had tried to explain its function, collecting body moisture, reclaiming water from breath and waste, maintaining core temperature through some kind of heat exchange system. "Every Freeman wears a still suit in the desert," Hara had said. "It is the difference between life and death, even for one who flies." Vegeta had tossed it aside. He'd survived in the vacuum of space. He'd trained in conditions that would kill ordinary beings in seconds. He didn't need their primitive moisture recycling technology. But now, alone in the chamber with hours until the challenge, he found his hand returning to his throat, dry, uncomfortably so. He'd been offered water, a cup of it, presented with ceremony, and had drunk it without thinking. Only afterward had he noticed the silence that followed, the weight of eyes watching him consume what was apparently precious beyond measure. The door curtain shifted. Paul Muad'Dib entered without invitation, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. His blue eyes gleamed in the glow globe light. "Most Outworlders don't understand the still suit at first," Paul said, gesturing to the discarded garment. "They see it as restrictive, uncomfortable. But the Freemen know truth. Freedom comes through discipline. Water discipline most of all." "I don't need lectures from children," Vegeta said, though Paul couldn't have been more than 16 or 17 standard years. "I'm 15, Paul replied, as if reading his thoughts. "And I've seen more futures than you've lived years. In most of them, you die tomorrow. Jameis is faster than you expect with the Kreis knife. In the visions where you hesitate, where you hold back your strength out of arrogance, his blade finds your throat in the first exchange." Vegeta's eyes narrowed. "You claim to see the future?" "The spice opened my mind," Paul said, settling onto the floor with crossed legs. "I drank the water of life, poison that transforms or kills. It awakened prescience. Now I see probability clouds, branching paths, possible futures stretching ahead like corridors through time. And you..." He paused, studying Vegeta with disconcerting intensity. "You blur the visions. Where you stand, futures branch wildly. It's like looking at a storm, chaos and potential, but no clear path." "Good," Vegeta said. "I don't like the idea of some prophet knowing my every move." Paul's expression shifted, something between relief and concern. "Neither do I. The visions are a trap as much as a gift. I see terrible futures where billions die in my name, jihad spreading across the galaxy like fire. I've tried to prevent it, but every path I choose seems to lead there anyway." He looked at Vegeta directly. "Except the paths where you exist. Those futures are different, unclear, maybe better, maybe worse, but different." Vegeta processed this information. Prescience, the ability to see future events. It explained the boy's unnatural awareness, the weight in his gaze. It was also the kind of ability that would make combat almost impossible. How did you fight someone who saw your attacks before you made them? This prescience of yours, Vegeta said, does it work in combat? Sometimes, Paul admitted. Against most opponents, I see their strikes before they make them, but prescience has limits. It shows probabilities, not certainties. A sufficiently chaotic opponent, someone whose actions I can't predict, can disrupt the visions. He smiled faintly. You would be extremely difficult to fight, Vegeta. Your energy, your speed, your power, they don't fit any pattern I've seen. Then you're wise to stay out of my way. Paul stood, moving toward the door curtain. The Fremen respect strength, but they worship survival. Jamis will fight to kill. If you want to earn the Sietch's respect, you need to understand what that means. This isn't a tournament with rules. This is Tahaddi, a duel to the death for water rights and honor. I've killed before, Vegeta said quietly. I know. Paul paused at the threshold. I saw that in the visions too. You've destroyed beings of immense power, conquered enemies who could shatter planets. But here, in this Sietch, you'll kill a man with a wife and sons. A man who challenges you because he fears what you represent. Change, disruption, the end of the ways he understands. Paul's voice softened. Stilgar will try to stop the fight. He sees value in you. But if you refuse the challenge now, the Fremen will name you coward. You'll never leave Arrakis alive. I don't run from fights. I didn't think you would. Paul slipped through the curtain, then paused. One more thing. When Jamis falls, the Fremen will offer you his water, his body's moisture, reclaimed. It's an honor, the gift of life, from the dead to the living. Don't refuse it, and don't ask what they mean by reclaiming the water. Then he was gone, leaving Vegeta alone with the stillsuit and his thoughts. Sunset on Arrakis turned the desert sky into shades of blood and copper. The Sietch's gathering place was a massive chamber carved from living rock, its ceiling supported by natural pillars. Glow globes floated along the walls, and a circle had been cleared in the center, 30 meters across, marked with crushed spice that gave off that pervasive cinnamon smell. Fremen filled every available space, hundreds of them silent and watching. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Elders occupied the best viewing positions. Warriors stood along the circle's edge, their blue eyes reflecting the glow globe light. Vegeta walked to the circle's center, wearing his Saiyan armor but leaving his arms bare. He'd considered removing the armor entirely. It seemed unsporting to fight with superior protection, but decided against it. These people needed to understand what a Saiyan warrior was. Half measures would only breed contempt. Jamis entered from the opposite side, and Vegeta reassessed the man immediately. Stripped to the waist, Jamis moved with the fluid grace of a master knife fighter. Scars crisscrossed his chest and arms, evidence of previous duels. In his right hand, he held a milky white blade that seemed to glow with inner light. The Kriss knife, made from sandworm tooth, if Vegeta remembered the earlier conversations correctly. Stilgar stood at the circle's edge, his weathered face grave. This is Tahaddi challenge. Jamis of Sietch Tabr against Vegeta of the Saiyan. Single combat to the death. The winner claims water rights. The loser's water returns to the tribe. He looked at both fighters. There is no shame in withdrawing. A challenge withdrawn can be renewed another day. I do not withdraw, Jamis said flatly. Neither do I, Vegeta replied. Stilgar nodded slowly. Then let it be done. May Shai Hulud guide the righteous blade. He stepped back. The gathered freemen began a low, rhythmic chant, something in a language Vegeta didn't recognize. The sound echoed off the stone walls, creating an atmosphere of ritual and inevitability. Jamis moved first, circling to Vegeta's left with the crysknife held low. Professional technique. He was testing range, looking for openings, reading Vegeta's stance for weaknesses. Vegeta simply stood still, arms at his sides. "Are we going to dance or are you going to fight?" Jamis's eyes flashed with anger. Good. Angry opponents made mistakes. The Fremen warrior lunged, not wildly, but with the controlled aggression of someone who'd killed 12 men in exactly this scenario. The crysknife came up in a gutting strike, aimed at Vegeta's unprotected abdomen. Vegeta sidestepped at normal human speed, letting Jamis's blade pass millimeters from his skin. The warrior recovered instantly, spinning into a backhand slash that would have opened Vegeta's throat. Vegeta leaned back, and the blade cut only air. "Too slow," Vegeta said. Jamis attacked in earnest then, a flurry of strikes that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. High, low, feinting left, and striking right, using footwork to create angles. The crysknife was a blur of milky white, and Vegeta had to admit the man had skill. But skill meant nothing against the gap in their power. Vegeta blocked with his forearm, and the crysknife, supposedly able to cut through anything, scraped against his skin without penetrating. Jamis's eyes widened in shock. Vegeta caught the man's wrist, holding him in place effortlessly. "This blade of yours," Vegeta said, examining the crysknife while Jamis struggled uselessly. "It's made from the worm's tooth? Impressive craftsmanship, but it's still just a knife." He released Jamis's wrist and backhanded the man across the circle. Not at full strength. That would have been unnecessarily fatal, but hard enough to send Jamis tumbling across the spice-marked floor. The gathered freemen gasped. Several shouted warnings. Jamis climbed to his feet, spitting blood, his eyes now showing something beyond anger. Fear. "You're not human," Jamis breathed. "I'm Saiyan," Vegeta corrected. "There's a difference." Jamis charged again, abandoning technique for desperate fury. The crysknife sought Vegeta's eyes, throat, heart, any vital target. Vegeta batted each strike aside with casual precision, not even bothering to dodge. The blade couldn't harm him. The speed couldn't match him. The skill couldn't bridge the fundamental gap between a human knife fighter and a Saiyan prince. "Enough," Stilgar called from the circle's edge. "Jamis, withdraw. This is not fair." "No," Jamis roared. "Tahadi cannot be stopped. One lives, one dies." Vegeta caught Jamis's knife hand again, this time twisting. The crysknife clattered to the floor. Jamis threw a punch with his free hand. A good punch, properly formed, but Vegeta caught that too. Now he held both of Jamis's wrists, and the Freeman warrior hung suspended, unable to break free. "You challenged me out of fear," Vegeta said quietly, so only Jamis could hear. "Fear that I would disrupt your world, change your ways, bring chaos to your ordered life. You are right to fear me. I am disruption, I am change. But you are wrong to think a knife could stop it." "Then kill me," Jamis said, and there was no plea in his voice, only acceptance. "I lost. The water is yours." Vegeta looked into the man's blue eyes and saw something he recognized. Pride. The inability to accept defeat. The warrior's code that said death was preferable to humiliation. He'd felt exactly the same way when Frieza destroyed planet Vegeta, when Kakarot surpassed him again and again, when Majin Buu forced him to sacrifice everything. Pride was a Saiyan trait. Apparently it was a Fremen trait, too. Vegeta released Jamis's wrists and stepped back. "Pick up your knife." Silence fell across the gathering place. Even the rhythmic chanting stopped. Jamis stared at him. "What?" "Your knife." Vegeta repeated, gesturing to the fallen Kry's knife. Pick it up. Fight me properly. Use everything you have. Technique, speed, skill. Show me what a Fremen warrior can do when death is certain. Die like a warrior, not like prey. Jameis's expression shifted through confusion, anger, and finally, something like gratitude. He retrieved the Kry's knife, gripping it with renewed purpose. When he looked at Vegeta again, the fear was gone. Only determination remained. "Thank you," Jameis said simply. Then he attacked with everything he had. It was beautiful in its way. Jameis moved like water, the Kry's knife an extension of his arm. Every strike was perfect. Textbook technique, executed with desperate precision. He used the terrain, the light, even the sound of the watching Fremen to create openings. It was the fighting style of someone who'd survived in impossible conditions through sheer skill and will. Vegeta let it continue for nearly a minute, studying the techniques, respecting the effort. Then when Jameis overextended on a lunge, Vegeta struck. A single punch, clean, precise, to the heart. Jameis's eyes widened. The Kry's knife fell from nerveless fingers. He stood for a moment, swaying, then collapsed forward. Vegeta caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him gently to the spice-marked floor. "You fought well," Vegeta said quietly. "Better than most I've faced. If you'd been born on planet Vegeta, you might have become a fine warrior." Jameis's lips moved. Vegeta leaned closer to hear the whispered words. "The water is yours. Use it well." Then he was gone. The light faded from those blue eyes, and Jameis of Sietch-Tabr died on the floor where he'd killed 12 men before. Vegeta stood, looking at the body he'd killed before, thousands of times, across dozens of worlds. But those had been battles of conquest, fights against enemies who threatened his survival or his pride. This was different. Jameis had challenged him, not from malice but from duty to his tribe, from fear of the unknown, and Vegeta had killed him for it. The gathered Fremen remained silent. Then Stilgar entered the circle, followed by 2 women carrying what looked like medical equipment. They moved to Jameis's body with practiced efficiency, and Vegeta realized with cold clarity what Paul had warned him about. They were extracting the water. "Jameis gave his life well," Stilgar said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "His water will feed the tribe. His courage will be remembered. And the Outworlder Vegeta has proven strength beyond measure." He looked directly at Vegeta. "You gave Jameis the warrior's death he sought. For this, the Sietch honors you. His water is yours by right of Tahadi." They presented Vegeta with a flask, perhaps 2 liters of clear liquid, Jameis's body moisture, reclaimed and purified. Every person in the chamber watched to see what he would do. Vegeta looked at the flask, understanding the weight of the moment. These people recycled everything, wasted nothing. In their culture, this was the highest honor, the dead giving life to the living. He raised the flask to his lips and drank. It tasted like water, just water. But the Fremen's collective exhalation told him he'd done something right. "The water is accepted," Stilgar declared. "Vegeta of the Saiyan has drunk the gift of Jameis. He is bound by water debt to Sietch-Tabr. He is bound to us, and we to him." Vegeta had no idea what he'd just committed himself to, but Paul's slight nod from the crowd suggested it was significant. The gathering dispersed slowly, Fremen approaching to touch Vegeta's shoulder or arm, some gesture of respect or acceptance. Hara, the woman who'd given him the still suit, approached with 2 young boys clinging to her desert robes. "I was Jameis's wife," she said, her voice steady despite obvious grief. "By water law, you may claim me and my sons. We will serve you, or you may release us to another man's care." Vegeta stared at her, then at the children, whose blue eyes watched him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Jameis's family. His responsibility now, apparently. "I have no need of servants," Vegeta said carefully. "Live as you wish. Your water debt or whatever is discharged." Hera studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are strange, Outworlder," but Jameis spoke truly in his final breath. "You are a warrior?" She touched his arm once, a brief contact, then guided her sons away into the crowd. Chani appeared at Vegeta's side, her expression unreadable. "You gave Jameis an honorable death. The Sietch will remember. But you also showed mercy by allowing him to die with his blade. The Fremen do not forget such things." "I just wanted a fair fight," Vegeta muttered. "On Arrakis, there are no fair fights, only survival and death." She gestured toward a tunnel leading deeper into the Sietch. "Come, you've earned rest, and tomorrow the real challenges begin." "What do you mean?" Johnny's smile was sharp as a crysknife. "Word of this duel will spread. The Harkonnens will hear of an Outworlder who flies without suspensors and shrugs off blades. The Guild will hear of someone whose future cannot be clearly seen. The Bene Gesserit will hear of a genetic anomaly." She met his eyes. "You wanted to leave Arrakis, Vegeta. You should have kept your head down and stayed quiet. Now every major power in the Imperium will want you captured, studied, or dead." Vegeta felt a familiar sensation, the thrill of worthy opponents taking notice. Finally, something interesting. "Good," he said. "Let them come." Behind them, in the gathering place, Fremen workers cleaned Jameis's blood from the spice-marked floor. And in the deep desert beyond the Sietch, sandworms moved beneath the dunes, ancient and patient, waiting for the next disruption to their eternal domain. The Harkonnen spy had been in Sietch Tabr for 3 months, disguised as a spice smuggler seeking refuge. He'd learned the language, adopted the water discipline, even endured the testing that earned him limited acceptance among the Fremen. His mission was simple: observe, report, and wait for opportunities to sabotage the growing alliance between the Atreides and the desert tribes. Now, crouched in a communications alcove with a transmitter no larger than his thumb, he whispered into the device using Harkonnen battle cant. "Confirmed, Outworlder demonstrating impossible capabilities, physical invulnerability to Cry-Snife, superhuman strength, flight without suspensors or wings, killed Jameis in single strike, Sietch treating him as waterbound ally." He paused, licking dry lips. "Recommend immediate intervention. This anomaly could shift the balance of..." A hand clamped over his mouth from behind. Before he could struggle, he was lifted off the ground with effortless strength and carried into deeper shadow. The spy's training kicked in. He tried to bite, to strike nerve clusters, to break free, but the grip was immovable as stone. "You're not Fremen," a harsh voice said in his ear. "Your movements are wrong. You breathe like someone who learned water discipline from a manual instead of living it, and you smell like that Baron's pleasure houses, perfume and corruption." The hand released his mouth, but maintained its grip on his collar. The spy found himself facing blue eyes that held no mercy whatsoever. Not the Outworlder. One of the real Fremen, a woman named Shishakli, known for her skill in detecting infiltrators. "I don't know what you..." the spy began. Shishakli's crysknife opened his throat before he could finish the lie. She lowered his body carefully, already signaling for the water reclamation team. Waste nothing, not even traitor's water. But the message had already transmitted. On Gidi Prime, in the fortress that housed House Harkonnen's inner council, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen floated in his suspensor field, reading the report with growing interest. His grotesque body, bloated with decades of excess, quivered with something approaching excitement. An outworlder, the Baron mused, his voice carrying the oily smoothness of poisoned honey. One who flies, one who cannot be cut, one who disrupts Muad'Dib's prescient visions. He turned to his nephew, Feyd-Rautha, who stood by the chamber's viewport. "What do you make of this, my dear boy?" Feyd-Rautha was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp edges and deadly purpose. His eyes, lighter blue than the spice-addicted Fremen, studied the report with tactical precision. A weapon or a threat, possibly both. Precisely. The Baron clapped his hands together, the sound grotesque coming from those corpulent fingers. If the Atreides or the Fremen control this Vegeta creature, they gain a strategic asset beyond calculation. But if we can capture him... The Baron's smile showed too many teeth. "Peter, where is that twisted mentat?" Peter de Vries emerged from the shadows, his sappho-stained lips twisted in a permanent sneer. The twisted mentat's eyes gleamed with the unnatural intelligence of someone whose moral conditioning had been deliberately broken. "Present, my Baron. Calculate the value of this outworlder. Full mentat projection." Peter's eyes went distant, his mind processing variables at inhuman speed. Insufficient data for precise calculation. However, probability assessment suggests significant strategic value. If the subject can withstand Kray's knife strikes, he likely resists lasguns, Mauler pistols, and conventional weapons. If he flies naturally, he negates our aerial superiority. If he disrupts prescience. Peter's eyes refocused, sharp with malice. He makes Muad'Dib blind. The boy prophet's greatest weapon becomes useless. Value, beyond calculation in spice equivalency. "Then we take him," the Baron decided. "Feyd, prepare your forces. I want this Vegeta captured alive if possible, dead if necessary, and studied either way. Use whatever resources required." "The Atreides will protect him," Feyd observed. "Duke Leto has sheltered this outworlder, even housing him with the Fremen. An assault on Sietch Tabr could violate the Great Convention." "Then we'll be subtle," the Baron purred. "Well, as subtle as necessary. Use the desert, use the worms, use whatever Fremen can be bought or threatened. And Feyd." "Yes, Uncle? If you can kill Muad'Dib in the process, I'll give you Arrakis as your personal fief." Feyd-Rautha's smile matched his uncle's for cruelty. "It will be done." Vegeta stood on the Sietch's highest observation point, looking across the deep desert as the twin suns rose. Endless sand stretched to every horizon, broken only by distant rock formations and the occasional ripple that suggested something massive moving beneath the surface. He'd spent the night in meditation, not the stillness of monks, but the Saiyan practice of focusing ki, assessing his body's condition, evaluating threats. The assessment was troubling. His power remained at full capacity, but the desert environment was more draining than he'd anticipated. Not dangerous exactly, but constantly demanding. Every breath pulled moisture from his lungs. Every moment in the sun evaporated sweat before it could cool him. His body compensated automatically, but it required energy. Ki reserves that would normally replenish effortlessly now cycled at slightly reduced efficiency. He'd also noticed something else, the spice. It was in everything, the air, the food, even the water. A cinnamon scent and taste that had seemed merely annoying at first but now felt pervasive. He'd consumed it with Jameis's water, with the breakfast the Fremen provided, with every breath in the Sietch's recycled atmosphere. And it was changing something. Nothing dramatic, no weakness or loss of control. But occasionally, at the edge of his perception, he thought he saw. Flickers, possibilities, moments that hadn't happened yet but might. A Fremen warrior approaching from the left before he actually appeared. A glow globe flickering out seconds before it did. Trivial things, easily dismissed as heightened awareness. Except Vegeta had trained his senses for decades. He knew the difference between anticipation and foreknowledge. The spice affects everyone differently, Paul's voice said from behind him. Vegeta didn't turn. He'd sensed the boy's approach. For most, it extends life and enhances awareness. For some, like the guild navigators, it grants prescience. For you, Paul moved to stand beside him, also looking out over the desert. I'm not sure what it's doing. Your futures remain unclear. But I see the spice working in you, changing you. I don't want your drugs' changes, Vegeta said flatly. You don't have a choice. The spice is Arrakis. It's in the air because the sandworms produce it. It's in the water because the spice gets into everything. It's in your body now, and your body is adapting. Paul's voice held sympathy. Welcome to the addiction, Vegeta. Everyone on Arrakis shares it. Leave the planet, and withdrawal will kill you within months. Stay, and the spice will transform you in ways neither of us can predict. Vegeta's hands clenched, trapped again. Not by chains or threats, but by simple biology and an environment he hadn't chosen. There are ways off-planet that don't require guild transport, Paul continued. Smuggler ships, hidden routes. The Spacing Guild doesn't control everything, despite what they claim. But they all require currency, spice, or political favor. And right now, you have neither. Then I'll earn it. How? By fighting. The Fremen would welcome that. We need warriors for the coming battles. But fighting won't get you off-planet faster. It'll just make you more valuable to people who want to control you. Paul gestured to the desert. The Harkonnens have probably heard about you by now. The Bene Gesserit certainly have. The guild navigators may have already seen you in their prescient visions. Every power in the Imperium will want to know what you are and how to use you. Let them try. Paul smiled slightly. That's what I said when I first drank the water of life and saw the terrible future stretching ahead. Let them try to stop me. Let them try to prevent the jihad. But prescience doesn't work that way. The more you fight against the future, the more you ensure it happens. Action creates reaction. Resistance creates opportunity for control. You're saying I should do nothing? I'm saying you should choose your battles carefully. On Arrakis, the greatest strength is knowing when to hide and when to strike. The sandworm doesn't fight the desert. It is the desert. It survives because it's perfectly adapted to the environment. Paul looked at Vegeta directly. You're not adapted yet. You're still thinking like an outworlder, like someone who can force his way through problems with raw power. Learn desert thinking, or the desert will kill you. Before Vegeta could respond, Stilgar appeared at the observation point's entrance, his expression grim. Muad'Dib, Vegeta, Harkonnen Thopters approaching from the north, full military formation, at least 20 craft, possibly more. They're not hiding their approach. They want us to see them, Paul said immediately. A show of force. They're testing our response. He turned to Vegeta. This is your first real choice. The Harkonnens are coming, probably for you. You can fight, which will reveal your full capabilities to everyone watching. You can hide, which the Fremen will see as cowardice, or you can observe and learn before committing to action. Vegeta's instinct screamed to fight, to meet the approaching threat with overwhelming force and show these Harkonnens exactly what happened to those who threatened him. But Paul's words nagged at him. Every power in the Imperium will want to know what you are. What would a Fremen do? Vegeta asked. Stilgar looked surprised by the question. A Fremen would let the desert fight for him. The worms, the storms, the heat. We don't face Harkonnen military formations directly. We can't match their technology in open battle. We use the terrain. We strike from ambush. We make them bleed slowly until they lose the will to continue. Guerrilla tactics, Vegeta muttered. He'd used similar strategies on planets with hostile environments during his time under Frieza. It worked, but it felt dishonorable somehow. A Saiyan elite warrior reduced to hiding and ambushing like a common insurgent. But he wasn't on planet Vegeta. He was on Arrakis, and different environments demanded different strategies. "Show me," Vegeta said. "Show me how a Fremen fights." Stilgar's weathered face showed something like respect. "Then come. We'll watch from the ridge. You'll see how the desert protects those who understand it." They moved through the Sietch's tunnels, gathering a small group of Fremen warriors, Chani among them, who'd been assigned to observation duty. The group emerged onto a rocky ridge overlooking the approach vector, using natural cover and camouflage cloaks that made them nearly invisible against the stone. The Harkonnen formation was visible in the distance, ornithopters in tight military formation, their black and blue livery stark against the pale desert sky. They flew in perfect precision, a demonstration of House Harkonnen's military superiority. 24 craft, one of the Freeman observers reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Troop carriers and gunships, enough force to assault a Sietch. "They won't find the Sietch," Stilgar said calmly. "We've hidden the entrances, but they'll search, and searching will cost them." Vegeta watched as the Harkonnen formation began to spread out, individual thopters breaking off to search specific coordinates. They were methodical, professional, using overlapping search patterns that would make evasion difficult. Then one of the thopters flew too close to an area of sand that looked no different from any other. The sandworm that erupted from beneath could have swallowed Vegeta's crashed pod whole. It rose from the desert like a living mountain, its segmented body gleaming in the sunlight, its circular mouth ringed with crystalline teeth, each as long as a man was tall. The worm moved with impossible speed for something so massive, catching the Harkonnen thopter in its maw before the pilot could react. The aircraft vanished into the worm's gullet. Metal screamed, then silence. The remaining Harkonnen craft scattered, gaining altitude rapidly, but two more had flown over similar areas, and two more worms rose from the sand, smaller than the first but no less deadly. Another thopter fell, then another. "They're using shields," Chani observed, pointing. "See the shimmer? Personal defensive shields. But shields drive the worms into killing frenzy. Every Freeman child learns this. The Harkonnens know it too, but they're so dependent on shield technology, they can't imagine fighting without it." Vegeta watched with growing interest. The sandworms were formidable predators, faster than they appeared, perfectly adapted to their environment, and apparently attracted to some kind of energy signature. The Harkonnen forces were technologically superior, but fundamentally mismatched to the terrain, environment as weapon. Simple, but effective. The Harkonnen formation regrouped in the air well above the sand. They'd lost 5 craft in less than 2 minutes. The remaining thopters circled warily, clearly unwilling to descend to searching altitude again. Then one of them broadcast on open channels, the sound carrying clearly in the desert air. "Attention, Fremen rebels. We know the Outworlder called Vegeta hides among you. Surrender him to House Harkonnen, and we will withdraw peacefully. Refuse, and we will return with sufficient force to scour every setch in the desert. You have 1 hour to comply." Silence fell over the observation ridge. Every Fremen turned to look at Vegeta. "Well," Vegeta said quietly, "at least they're direct about it." Stilgar's jaw tightened. "The Fremen do not surrender our waterbound brothers to Harkonnen dogs. This is insult beyond tolerance." "They're bluffing," Paul said, though his voice held uncertainty. "The Harkonnens don't have the forces to assault every sietch. The Emperor would never allow it. Such an action would destabilize the spice flow, but they might assault one sietch as an example." Chani touched Vegeta's arm. "You don't owe us this fight. You're not truly Freeman, no matter what the Water Debt says. If you want to face them, end this quickly, we would understand." Vegeta considered his options. He could fly up there right now, destroy every Harkonnen craft in seconds, and make the threat disappear. Simple, direct. The Saiyan way, but it would also reveal exactly what he could do. Every sensor on those craft would record his capabilities. The data would spread to every power in this Imperium. He'd become a target for forces he didn't yet understand, in a political landscape he hadn't learned to navigate. Desert thinking. Know when to hide and when to strike. "No," Vegeta said finally. "Let them wait their hour. Let them think the Fremen are afraid. Then show me how your people fight. I want to learn." Stilgar studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You begin to understand the desert's wisdom. Very well. We'll give them their hour, and when they return seeking war, they'll find the deep desert has teeth." The Fremen melted back into the rocks, vanishing as if they'd never been there. Vegeta followed, still watching the circling Harkonnen craft with predatory interest. 1 hour. Then he'd see what passed for warfare on this desert planet. And after that, he'd decide whether these Harkonnens were worth fighting or merely worth ignoring. The Harkonnen forces returned in greater numbers, 50 ornithopters this time, plus 3 massive troop carriers that could deploy hundreds of Harkonnen soldiers and Sardaukar advisors. The Emperor's terror troops, officially on loan to Baron Harkonnen, but actually ensuring the Imperial throne maintained some control over Arrakis. Vegeta watched from a different observation point, deeper in the rock formations, as the Fremen prepared their response. What he saw impressed him despite his initial skepticism. The Fremen didn't mass for battle. They didn't prepare defensive positions or ready heavy weapons. Instead, they dispersed. Small groups of 3 to 5 warriors, each equipped with the minimum necessary for desert survival. Still suits, maker hooks, thumpers, and those curved krisk knives that seemed more ceremonial than practical. "You're splitting your forces," Vegeta observed, watching Stilgar coordinate the deployment through a series of hand signals. "In my experience, divided forces get destroyed piecemeal." "In open battle, yes," Stilgar agreed. "But this is not open battle. This is the desert's warfare. We do not meet strength with strength. We meet it with absence, then strike when absence becomes presence." He pointed to various positions across the desert. "Watch." The Harkonnen formation descended, more cautiously this time, maintaining altitude until they identified landing zones free of worm sign. The troop carriers touched down on rock formations, deploying soldiers in disciplined ranks. Sardaukar moved among them. Vegeta could identify them by their superior movement and the respect even Harkonnen officers showed them. Vegeta's tactical mind assessed their formation. Good discipline, overlapping fields of fire, shields active, creating that shimmer he'd seen before. Professional military deployment by any standard. Then the thumpers started. Freeman warriors, hidden in rocks over a kilometer away, activated devices that pounded rhythmically against the sand. Vegeta felt the vibration even at this distance, a specific pattern that resonated through the desert floor. "Worm calling," Chani said beside him. She joined the observation group, her blue eyes fixed on the Harkonnen positions. Each thumper creates vibrations like prey on the sand. The worms investigate, and the Harkonnen shields drive them into frenzy, Vegeta finished, remembering her earlier explanation. The first worm arrived within minutes, not as large as the one that had destroyed the initial Thopter, but big enough, perhaps 100 meters long. It emerged from the sand directly beneath a Harkonnen squad, scattering soldiers like toys. Shields sparked and failed as the worm's crystalline teeth crunched through them. Screams carried across the desert. The Harkonnen forces responded professionally, concentrating fire on the worm. Laser guns flashed, and where the coherent light struck active shields, nuclear explosions erupted. Small tactical nukes, but devastating at close range. The worm recoiled, wounded but not killed, diving back beneath the sand. "They used laser guns against shields," Vegeta said, surprised. "I thought that created explosions." "It does," Paul said, appearing at Vegeta's other side. He moved silently for someone who claimed to see all futures. The Harkonnen commander either panicked or calculated that killing the worm was worth the atomic reaction. Either way, he's just violated the Great Convention against atomic weapons. Technically, laser-gun shield interaction creates atomic-scale explosions, but it's considered an accident of technology rather than deliberate atomic warfare. Still, the other great houses will hear about this. The Harkonnens just weakened their political position. Paul smiled faintly. The desert takes more than water. More thumpers activated from different positions. More worms arrived, drawn by the vibrations and maddened by shield harmonics. The Harkonnen formation began to collapse as soldiers broke ranks, trying to escape the underground threats. Officers shouted orders that went unheeded. Even the Sardaukar, disciplined beyond normal human capacity, showed strain as the third worm of the engagement rose from beneath their position. Then the Fremen struck. They came from the rocks, from buried sand positions, from directions the Harkonnens hadn't thought to guard. Not in mass waves, but in small, precise raids. 3 Freemen would appear, kill isolated soldiers with crisp knives to avoid laser gun shield reactions, then vanish before reinforcements arrived. Another group would sabotage Thopter engines. Another would plant explosives in the troop carriers' loading ramps. It was guerrilla warfare at its finest. Asymmetric, unpredictable, devastating to morale. The Harkonnen forces had superior technology and numbers, but the Fremen had superior knowledge of terrain and tactics, perfected over centuries of desert survival. Vegeta watched a particular engagement with professional interest. 5 Fremen warriors engaged a squad of 10 Harkonnen soldiers. The Harkonnens had shields, laser guns, body armor. The Fremen had crisp knives, desert robes, and intimate knowledge of shield weakness. The slow blade penetrates the shield. The Fremen moved inside the Harkonnen defensive perimeter, their knife strikes carefully controlled to pass through shields at sub-threshold speeds. It was knife fighting elevated to art form, precise, economical, lethal. Within 30 seconds, 6 Harkonnen soldiers were dead, their water already being collected by practiced hands. The remaining 4 retreated in disorder. "Your people fight well," Vegeta admitted, "for humans. The desert teaches or kills," Stilgar said with quiet pride. "Those who learn its lessons survive. Those who don't become water for the tribe." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than an hour. The Harkonnen forces withdrew in disarray, leaving behind nearly 100 dead, 3 destroyed troop carriers, and a dozen damaged thopters. Freeman casualties, 7 wounded, none dead. The wounded were already being treated, their water carefully preserved. But Vegeta noticed something the Fremen seemed to have missed. One of the Harkonnen thopters hadn't retreated. It had landed far from the main battle, hidden behind a rock formation, and several Sardaukar in unmarked armor had disembarked, moving with the stealth of elite operatives rather than line soldiers. "Paul," Vegeta said quietly, "you mentioned Sardaukar earlier, terror troops. What makes them different from regular soldiers?" Paul's expression tightened. "They're trained on Salusa Secundus, a prison planet with conditions almost as harsh as Arrakis. 1 in 10 survives the training, those who do become the finest soldiers in the Imperium. Each Sardaukar is worth 10 normal troops. A full legion could conquer most planets." He paused. "Why?" "Because 6 of them just split off from the main force. They're not retreating, they're hunting." Vegeta pointed to barely visible movement in the rocks. "Professional stalkers, moving like they know exactly where they're going." Chani followed his gesture, her eyes widening. "They're heading toward the Setch, toward one of the hidden entrances." She pulled out a communication device, a primitive radio. "Stilgar, we have Sardaukar infiltrators, vector north-northeast." The radio exploded in her hand, not from damage, from a lasgun shot, so precisely aimed it destroyed the device without harming her. Chani dropped it immediately, already moving to cover. Paul dove left. Stilgar shouted warnings that sent Freeman warriors scattering. Vegeta stood still, tracking the shot's origin. There. A rock outcrop, 800 meters away. Impossible range for normal vision, but his Saiyan eyes saw the glint of a weapon's scope. The Sardaukar sniper fired again, this time at Vegeta's head. Vegeta caught the last bolt with his hand. The coherent light splashed against his palm like water against stone, dispersing harmlessly. He closed his fist, crushing the residual energy, then smiled. "Finally," he said, "someone who knows how to fight." He launched himself into the air, accelerating to supersonic speed in an instant. The sound barrier broke with a thunderclap that scattered sand in a massive plume. 3 seconds later, he landed on the outcrop where the Sardaukar team had positioned themselves. 6 men, Emperor's finest, each wearing light armor without shields. They'd learned from watching the worm attacks, each carrying weapons that looked more sophisticated than standard Harkonnen equipment, each moving with the synchronized precision of elite special forces. Their leader, identified by subtle insignia on his shoulder, assessed Vegeta in a fraction of a second and made his decision. "Target acquired. Pattern Omega, execute." The Sardaukar moved as one. 2 threw devices that exploded into nets of filament wire, monomolecular cutting edges designed to slice through anything. 2 more fired projectile weapons, no lasers that might cause atomic reactions, but high-velocity slugs that could penetrate light armor. The last 2 drew combat knives and moved to flank. Professional, coordinated, exactly the kind of tactical efficiency that would devastate normal opponents. The monofilament nets wrapped around Vegeta and shattered against his aura. The projectiles sparked off his skin like pebbles. The flanking knife fighters found themselves grabbed by the throat before they could complete their maneuver. Vegeta held them suspended, one in each hand, studying their faces. No fear. Just calculation and readiness to die if necessary. True warriors in their way. "You're better than the others," Vegeta said. "Explain why you're here." The leader answered, his voice steady despite the situation. "Baron Harkonnen wants you captured for study. Emperor Shaddam wants you eliminated as a potential threat. The Bene Gesserit want you brought to Wallach 9 for testing. The Spacing Guild wants you disappeared before you disrupt prescient projections." He paused. "We serve the Emperor. Your existence is politically inconvenient. Therefore, you die." "At least you're honest." Vegeta released the two he'd been holding, letting them collapse to the ground, gasping. "But if 6 of the Emperor's finest couldn't kill me, what makes you think anyone can?" "Because you're alone," the Sardaukar leader said, "and the desert doesn't care how strong you are." That's when Vegeta heard it, a vibration, growing stronger. The Sardaukar had planted thumpers while the battle raged, massive ones, industrial models that created vibrations powerful enough to attract the largest worms from deep desert. The sand began to shift. Vegeta felt the presence approaching, something enormous, ancient, and hungry. The Sardaukar activated suspensor belts, rising into the air on anti-gravity technology. Their leader smiled, a warrior's smile. "The desert will test you, Outworlder. Survive Shai-Hulud's judgment, and perhaps you are worthy to live. Fail, and you become water for the sand." They ascended rapidly, heading toward their hidden Thopter. Vegeta could have followed, could have destroyed them in seconds. But the vibration demanded his attention now. Whatever was coming was bigger than anything he'd seen yet. The sandworm that rose from the desert dwarfed its smaller cousins. 400 meters long, maybe more. Its mouth was a cavern rimmed with teeth the size of trees. Its segmented body created a wall of living flesh that blocked out the sun. Shai-Hulud, the great maker, god of the desert. The worm dove at Vegeta with shocking speed, its mouth opened wide enough to swallow a building. Vegeta thrust his hands forward, catching the creature's upper jaw. His feet dug into the sand as he arrested the worm's momentum, muscles straining against tonnage that defied calculation. The worm pushed. Vegeta pushed back. For a moment they were locked in a contest of pure strength, Saiyan warrior against desert god. Then Vegeta's ki exploded outward in a white aura that sent sand flying for a kilometer in every direction. He roared, the challenge cry of a warrior prince, and threw the sandworm. The creature flew backward through the air, its massive body creating a sonic boom as it tumbled. It crashed into a distant dune with impact that registered as a minor earthquake, sending a plume of sand into the sky like a nuclear explosion. Silence fell across the desert. The Sardaukar Thopter, already airborne, accelerated away at maximum speed. Even trained killers knew when to retreat. Vegeta floated above the sand, breathing hard. Not from exertion. Throwing the worm had required effort, but not anywhere near his limits. From realization, he just fought the most powerful natural predator on this planet. He'd won. And everyone with sensors had just recorded the entire thing. Paul appeared on the ridge, having run the distance at remarkable speed for a human. His face showed something between awe and concern. The Fremen have ridden Shai-Hulud for generations, but no one has ever fought one, not like that. "It attacked," Vegeta said simply, descending. "I defended myself." "You threw a 400-meter sandworm like it weighed nothing." Paul's voice was steady, but his eyes showed the weight of prescient knowledge. "Every faction in the Imperium will hear about this. The Bene Gesserit, the Guild, the great houses. They'll all want you more desperately now. You've just become the most valuable commodity in the known universe." "Good," Vegeta growled. "Maybe one of them can actually give me a challenge worth fighting." But as he said it, he noticed something odd. The sandworm he'd thrown was moving again, slowly, dragging its massive body back beneath the sand, injured but alive. And Vegeta felt something through his ki senses, a connection, not control, not dominance, but acknowledgement. The worm recognized him as something worthy of respect. The desert had tested him, and somehow he'd passed. Freeman warriors approached cautiously, their blue eyes wide. Stilgar reached them first, his weathered face showing an emotion Vegeta couldn't quite identify. I have seen 70 years on Arrakis. I have witnessed wonders and terrors beyond counting, but never have I seen someone fight Shai-Hulud with bare hands and live. He bowed slightly, a gesture of profound respect. You are no longer merely waterbound to us, Vegeta. You are Shai-Hulud, one who commands the desert's respect. The Sietch will honor you as we honor the Makers themselves. Chani's voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the desert silence. The legends spoke of a warrior from the stars who would challenge the desert itself. We thought it meant Muad'Dib. Perhaps the legends spoke of two. Paul's expression suggested he'd seen this moment in his visions and feared it. Or perhaps the legends were wrong. Perhaps Vegeta isn't here to save Arrakis. Perhaps he's here to break it. Vegeta ignored the prophecy talk. He was more concerned with practical matters. The Sardaukar said every major faction wants me captured or dead. What does that actually mean? It means, Paul said slowly, that you've run out of time to learn the desert's ways quietly. The Baron will send everything he has. The Guild will try to manipulate events. The Bene Gesserit will deploy Reverend Mothers. Even the Emperor might take direct action. He met Vegeta's eyes. The political war has begun, and you're the prize everyone wants to claim. Vegeta looked across the desert, at the endless sand and brutal sun that had nearly killed him on arrival, at the Fremen warriors who watched him with newfound respect, at Paul, whose prescient eyes saw futures Vegeta refused to believe in. Let them come, Vegeta said finally. All of them. I didn't survive Frieza, Cell, and Majin Buu just to be scared of politicians and prophets. But even as he said it, he felt the spice working in his system, the flickers of possibility growing stronger, the desert changing him in ways he didn't yet understand. The Saiyan prince had conquered the desert's challenge. Now he had to survive the Imperium's machinations, and somewhere in the distance, hidden behind dunes and political intrigue, the true powers of this universe were beginning to move. The Bene Gesserit arrived 3 days after Vegeta threw the sandworm. They came not with military force, but with something far more dangerous. Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam, the Emperor's truthsayer, accompanied by 2 younger sisters, whose eyes held the same calculating intelligence that made Vegeta's instincts scream danger. Paul met them at the Sietch entrance, his face carefully neutral. Vegeta watched from a shadowed alcove, following Stilgar's advice to observe before engaging. The Fremen had taught him that power wasn't always about the strongest fist. Sometimes it was about knowing when to remain unseen. Reverend Mother, Paul said, his voice respectful but guarded. Your presence honors Sietch Tabr, though I wonder what brings the Emperor's truthsayer to the deep desert. Moyam's ancient face showed no warmth. She was old, impossibly old by normal human standards, but moved with the precise control of someone who'd mastered every muscle, every nerve. Her eyes studied Paul with the intensity of someone reading a book written in flesh. You know why I'm here, Muad'Dib. Your prescience isn't so clouded that you can't see this moment. She gestured to her companions. We've come for the Outworlder, the one who flies, the one who broke Shai-Hulud's charge with bare hands, the one who... She paused, and something like hunger entered her voice. The one who doesn't appear in any breeding projection, not in 10,000 years of the Sisterhood's genetic calculations. Vegeta is under Fremen protection, Paul said carefully. Waterbound and Shahulu. To take him would require... We're not here to take him by force. Moyam's smile was thin as a knife edge. We're here to test him, the Gom Jabbar, the test of humanity. Surely even an outworlder can understand the value of proving he's human rather than animal. Vegeta had heard about the Gom Jabbar from Paul's warnings. A poison needle held at the neck, while the subject endured increasing pain. Fail to control yourself, move away from the pain, and the needle killed you instantly. It was a test the Bene Gesserit used to separate human from animal. Those who could overcome base instinct from those who couldn't. And if he refuses, Paul asked, then the Sisterhood will assume he's too dangerous to live, animal cunning dressed in human form. Mohiam's eyes found Vegeta's alcove, despite the shadows. Come out, Outworlder. I know you're there. Your breathing betrays you, despite your admirable attempt at stealth. Vegeta emerged, irritated at being detected. The Reverend Mother studied him with unnerving intensity, not like someone assessing a threat, but like someone evaluating livestock. Interesting, she murmured. Genetic structure unlike anything in our archives, muscle density suggesting strength far beyond human norms, skeletal reinforcement that would require generations of selective breeding to achieve. And those eyes. She stepped closer, and Vegeta resisted the urge to step back. Tell me, Vegeta of the Saiyan, are you human or something else wearing human shape? I'm Saiyan, Vegeta said flatly. Not human, not by your definition or mine. Then what are you? A warrior. Moyam's expression didn't change, but something in her posture suggested satisfaction. Good. Direct answers. No wasted words. You'll either pass the test or die within seconds. She produced a small box from her robes, ornate, ancient-looking, with a circular opening on one side. Place your hand in the box. Vegeta looked at the device, then at Mohiam, then at Paul. The boy's face showed concern, but also resignation. He'd seen this moment in his visions, and knew it couldn't be avoided. What does the box do? Vegeta asked. It creates pain, Mohiam said simply. Increasing pain. Pain that will make you want to pull your hand free, but if you do. She produced the Gom Jabbar, a needle so fine it was nearly invisible, glistening with poison. This enters your neck. Death in seconds. The test is simple. Prove you can override animal instinct with human will. And if I refuse the test, then you prove you're animal. And animals too dangerous to control must be eliminated. Her voice carried absolute certainty. The Sisterhood has resources you cannot imagine. Poisons that kill without trace. Manipulations that turn allies into enemies. We've toppled great houses and orchestrated the fall of planets. One outworlder, however powerful, is not beyond our reach. Vegeta's ki flared slightly, just enough to create visible distortion in the air. Both younger Bene Gesserit tensed, hands moving to hidden weapons. Mohiam didn't flinch. Interesting, she said again. An energy field generated by biological processes, no technology, pure biological capability. Her eyes gleamed. All the more reason to test you. If you're truly sentient, truly capable of thought beyond instinct, you'll submit to the test. If you're merely a powerful animal, you'll refuse and confirm our worst assessment. It was manipulation, obvious manipulation. Vegeta recognized it immediately, the same kind of psychological pressure Frieza had used, framing every choice as either obedience or cowardice, the kind of trap that forced you to comply or lose face. But he also recognized the trap's effectiveness. Refuse and the Bene Gesserit would dedicate themselves to his destruction, submit, and he maintained some degree of agency in their eyes, lesser of two evils, a calculation he'd made countless times in his service to Frieza. "Fine," Vegeta said, stepping forward. "Test me. But understand this. If your poison needle even touches my neck, I'll reduce this entire chamber to ashes before I die." "Fair terms," Mohiam said, positioning the Gom Jabbar at Vegeta's throat. The needle hovered millimeters from his skin, close enough that any involuntary movement would mean death. "Place your hand in the box." Vegeta thrust his hand into the opening. Pain exploded through his nervous system. Not physical pain, at least not at first. The box created the sensation of pain without actual tissue damage. Neural stimulation that made his hand feel like it was being burned, frozen, crushed, flayed all at once. It was an illusion, but his body's response was real. Every instinct screamed to pull his hand free, to escape the agony. Vegeta gritted his teeth and held still. The pain intensified. Now it felt like his hand was being eaten by acid, each nerve ending dissolving individually. His muscles trembled with the effort of remaining motionless. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Your hand is burning," Mohiam whispered, her voice carrying hypnotic weight. "The flesh chars, the bones crack. Soon nothing will remain but ash and agony. Pull your hand free. Save yourself." The voice. Paul had warned him about it. Bene Gesserit technique for command and suggestion, using specific tones to bypass conscious thought. It worked on most humans. Vegeta felt its pull, the compulsion to obey, embedded in the sound itself. He ignored it through sheer bloody-mindedness. A Saiyan prince didn't take orders from anyone. The pain escalated again. Now it felt like his entire arm was being consumed, the agony spreading through his shoulder and into his chest. His vision blurred. His ki flickered involuntarily as his body tried to defend itself. "Interesting," Mohiam murmured, though her voice seemed distant through the pain. His energy field responds to perceived threats. Autonomic defense system, remarkable adaptation. The pain reached his heart. His breathing became labored. Every instinct, millions of years of Saiyan evolution, demanded he remove himself from danger. But Vegeta had spent his entire life fighting instinct. He'd resisted Babidi's mind control through pure will. He'd held himself together when Buu killed his family. He'd endured training that would kill lesser beings. This box was nothing compared to his pride. The pain stopped. Vegeta's hand remained in the box, muscles locked from effort, but steady. The Gom Jabbar withdrew from his neck. Mohiam studied him with something approaching approval. "Remove your hand." Vegeta pulled his hand free. It looked perfectly normal. No burns, no damage. Just the slight tremor of overtaxed nerves. He flexed his fingers, reasserting control, forcing the shaking to stop through sheer will. "Human," Mohiam declared. "Or near enough. You can override base instinct with conscious thought. You can endure agony for purpose. You meet the minimum threshold." She returned the box and needle to her robes. "But that only makes you more dangerous. An animal we could predict. A human with your capabilities." She trailed off, studying him. "Tell me, Vegeta, do you have children?" The question caught him off guard. What? Children, offspring, genetic descendants. Mohiam's expression remained neutral, but her interest was palpable. "The Sisterhood has spent 10,000 years breeding for the Kwisatz Haderach, the one who can be many places at once, who can bridge space and time with prescient awareness. We've failed. Paul Atreides is close, but flawed." His prescience traps rather than frees, but your genetics—" She gestured at him. "You represent entirely new possibilities, strength beyond measure, durability that defies assassination, energy manipulation without technology. If we could incorporate your bloodline into the breeding program—" "No." Vegeta's voice carried absolute finality. "You refuse without hearing the offer? I'm not breeding stock for your genetic experiments. Find someone else." Mohiam's eyes narrowed. "The Sisterhood does not make requests lightly. We could offer you much: political protection, resources, safe passage off Arrakis, even—" She paused significantly. "A way to remove the spice addiction that now binds you to this planet." That made Vegeta pause. The addiction was real. He'd felt it growing stronger each day. The thought of leaving Arrakis only to die slowly from withdrawal was becoming a genuine concern. "You can cure the addiction?" "The Sisterhood has methods: genetic manipulation, gradual exposure reduction. It would take time, but yes, we could free you from spice dependency." Mohiam's voice carried the weight of truth. "In exchange, you would provide genetic material, nothing more, a simple medical procedure. You would never need to meet any potential offspring, never need to acknowledge their existence, but their genetics, and yours, would be incorporated into the breeding program." It was a reasonable offer, pragmatic, the kind of deal that made strategic sense. It also made Vegeta's stomach turn. He'd watched Trunks grow up, fought beside him, trained him. Whatever flaws Vegeta had as a father, and there were many, he'd never treated his son as merely genetic material. The idea of creating children with that sole purpose, of reducing bloodline to breeding statistics, was exactly the kind of cold calculation Frieza had used when deciding which Saiyan children to keep and which to eliminate. "My answer is still no." "Think carefully," Mohiam pressed. "You're trapped on Arrakis. Every major faction wants to control or kill you. The Sisterhood offers protection and freedom. All we ask is a sample of genetic material. Your pride cannot be worth eternal imprisonment on this desert world." "My pride is worth exactly that." Vegeta met her eyes directly. "I've been someone's tool before, served someone's purposes, betrayed my own values for pragmatic reasons. Never again. Find your Kwisatz Haderach some other way." Silence stretched across the chamber. The two younger Bene Gesserit looked to Mohiam for guidance. Paul watched with an expression that suggested he'd seen multiple versions of this conversation and wasn't sure which future they were following. Finally, Mohiam nodded slowly. "You are everything the reports suggested: powerful, proud. Impossible to manipulate through conventional means." She turned to leave, her companions following. At the threshold, she paused. "The Sisterhood will remember this conversation, Vegeta. We are patient. When you've spent sufficient time trapped here, when the full weight of political isolation bears down on you, when you realize the walls closing in, the offer will remain open for a time." They departed, leaving behind only the faint scent of spice and something else, a chemical signature Vegeta couldn't identify but instinctively distrusted. Paul approached carefully. "You made an enemy just now. The Bene Gesserit don't forget refusals. They'll work against you, subtly but effectively." "Let them work." Vegeta flexed his hand, still feeling phantom echoes of the box's illusory pain. "I've faced worse than witches with breeding programs." "Have you?" Paul's voice held doubt. "The Sisterhood has toppled empires, Vegeta. They don't fight with weapons or armies. They fight with words, manipulation, careful placement of agents across generations. By the time you realize they're your enemy, you've already lost. Then I'll have to be careful. Chani entered, her expression urgent. The Reverend Mother left something, a message. She says to tell Vegeta that the Guild Navigator Edric wishes to meet him tomorrow, in neutral territory. The Navigator claims to have information about returning to Vegeta's home universe. Vegeta's interest sharpened instantly. A way home. Or a trap, Paul warned. The Guild serves its own interests first. If they're offering help, they want something in return, something valuable. I don't care. Vegeta's voice carried determination. If there's even a chance of getting off this planet and finding my way back to Earth, I'll take it. Set up the meeting. Paul studied him for a long moment, prescient eyes, seeing futures that branched wildly. Very well. But Vegeta, the moment you meet with the Guild, you become entangled in Imperium politics at the highest level. There will be no going back to anonymity. Every faction will know you're negotiating. The stakes will escalate. Good, Vegeta said. I'm tired of hiding in caves and learning desert wisdom. I want answers, I want options, and I want off this planet. But even as he spoke, he felt the spice working deeper into his system. The flickers of prescience were becoming more frequent, not controlled visions like Paul experienced, but fragments, possibilities, futures that hadn't happened yet. In one fragment, he saw himself fighting something massive in the void of space. Not a sandworm, but something stranger. In another, he stood before an enormous golden figure that was somehow both man and worm. In a third, he was surrounded by freeman warriors who chanted his name like a prophet's. He shook his head, dispelling the visions. Prophecy and prescience were crutches for those too weak to forge their own path. He was Vegeta, prince of all Saiyans. His future would be whatever he chose to make it. The desert had tested him. The Bene Gesserit had tested him. Tomorrow the Guild would test him. He'd pass every test through sheer stubborn will, just as he always had. The meeting place was a rock formation called the Shield Wall, the massive geological barrier that separated the northern desert from the more temperate regions where the great houses maintained their cities. Here, in a natural amphitheater carved by wind over millennia, the Guild Navigator, Edric, waited. Vegeta approached with Paul, Stilgar, and a small escort of freeman warriors. They traveled by ornithopter, flying low to avoid detection by Harkonnen patrols. The journey gave Vegeta time to observe the landscape changing, sand giving way to rock, then to patches of hardy vegetation, finally to areas where moisture in the air was actually perceptible. The Guild chose this location deliberately, Paul explained as they descended. Neutral ground, close enough to civilization for their transport tanks, far enough from Harkonnen territory to avoid immediate military intervention. They want this meeting to happen without interference. What do they want from me? Vegeta asked. That's what concerns me. Paul's prescient eyes showed worry. I can't see this meeting clearly in my visions. The Guild Navigator's prescience interferes with mine. We create mutual blind spots. Whatever happens here, even I can't predict with certainty. The ornithopter landed on a rocky plateau. What dominated the space made even Vegeta pause in surprise. The Guild Navigator's transport tank was massive. A cylindrical container 50 meters long, filled with orange spice gas so concentrated it appeared almost liquid. Inside, barely visible through the murk, floated something that had once been human. Navigator Edric was grotesque. His body had elongated and mutated from centuries of spice exposure. Limbs vestigial and useless, head swollen to 3 times normal size. He floated in the spice gas like a malformed fetus, kept alive by technology and addiction. But his eyes, when they opened, held intelligence that transcended human limitation. Vegeta of the Saiyan. The navigator's voice came from speakers embedded in the tank, translated from whatever alien thought process his mutated brain now used. I have seen you in the futures, thousands of possible paths. In 93% of them, you die on Arrakis within 6 months. In 4%, you escape, but die in transit. In the remaining 3%, the massive head shifted, studying Vegeta through the orange murk. In the remaining 3%, you shatter the Imperium's political structure so completely that humanity's future becomes unreadable. Chaos, uncertainty, the antithesis of everything the Guild maintains. "I don't care about your political structure," Vegeta said bluntly. "I was told you have information about returning to my universe." Information, yes. Solutions. If something that grotesque could smile, Edric did. More complex. Your arrival in this universe was not random chance. You intersected with a Guild Highliner's fold space transition, the moment when normal space collapses and distant points connect. Your pod's engines created a resonance pattern that shouldn't exist. It tore through dimensional barriers. Can it be replicated? Possibly. The Guild has studied fold space for 10,000 years. We understand the mathematics of connecting distant points in space. Connecting distant universes. The navigator's voice held something like excitement. That would require different calculations. Dimensional coordinates rather than spatial ones. Energy requirements beyond anything currently available. But theoretically, he paused, and Vegeta sensed the weight of what came next. Theoretically, with sufficient spice melange to fuel prescient navigation and sufficient energy to tear dimensional barriers, yes, you could return to your origin universe. Vegeta's heart rate increased despite his attempt to remain calm. A way home. An actual possible way to return to Earth. To Bulma, to Trunks, to the battles and challenges that mattered. What's the cost? Ah, the correct question. Edric's massive form shifted in the tank. The cost is this. You would need to steal a Guild Highliner, one of our massive transport ships capable of carrying entire fleets across the galaxy. You would need approximately 100,000 liters of concentrated spice melange, more than most planets produce in a decade. And you would need a navigator willing to attempt dimensional fold space, which would almost certainly result in that navigator's death. So it's impossible, improbable, not impossible. If you could somehow acquire those resources, if you could find a navigator desperate or insane enough to attempt the navigation, if the dimensional calculations proved accurate. The navigator's eyes gleamed. But there is another option, less certain, but requiring fewer impossible conditions. Tell me. The Spacing Guild recently detected anomalous fold space signatures in the Sigma Draconis system. 3 separate incidents where dimensional barriers weakened momentarily. We believe these represent natural rifts, places where your universe and ours temporarily connect. Edric's voice carried careful emphasis. If you could reach Sigma Draconis when the next rift occurs, if you could survive transit through unstable dimensional boundaries, you might return home. Without stealing anything, without condemning a navigator to death. When does the next rift occur? Unknown. Prescient observation suggests between 6 months and 3 years. The rifts are unpredictable, triggered by something we don't yet understand. Edric paused. But here is what I offer, Vegeta. The Guild will transport you to Sigma Draconis. We will monitor for dimensional rifts. When one occurs, We will bring you to it immediately. In exchange, here it comes, Vegeta thought, the real price. In exchange, you will perform one service for the Spacing Guild, one task of our choosing, within your capabilities, to be completed before we transport you. What task? We don't know yet. Edric's voice carried disturbing honesty. Futures branch wildly. Multiple scenarios where your capabilities serve guild interests. Perhaps you retrieve something from a dangerous location. Perhaps you eliminate a threat to spice production. Perhaps you simply exist as leverage against the Bene Gesserit's breeding program. A genetic wildcard they cannot predict or control. The navigator's massive head tilted. The task will be reasonable. Will not require you to kill innocents or betray your principles. But it will be dangerous, difficult, and absolutely necessary for guild interests. Vegeta considered the offer carefully. It was a contract with unknown terms, the kind of deal that inevitably turned into a trap. The guild would have him perform some task that aligned with their political goals, cementing his involvement in Imperium machinations. But it was also the first genuine possibility of going home he'd heard since crashing on this desert planet. I need time to consider, Vegeta said. Of course. You have 3 days to decide. Edric shifted in his tank. But know this. The longer you remain on Arrakis, the deeper the spice addiction becomes. Already your body requires it. Soon your mind will require it. Eventually, leaving this planet will mean death by withdrawal within weeks. The guild can mitigate the addiction somewhat, but only if you accept our offer soon. Another trap. Accept quickly or lose the ability to leave at all. Not a trap. Reality. The navigator's voice held no apology. Arrakis is a prison for all who stay too long. The spice chains you as surely as any cage. 3 days, Vegeta. Then the offer expires. We cannot risk you becoming so addicted that you're useless for the task we'll require. The transport tank began moving, hover suspensors carrying it toward a waiting guild shuttle. The meeting was over. Paul watched it depart, his face troubled. He's not lying about the addiction. I've felt it myself, the way spice becomes necessary for consciousness once you've awakened certain capabilities. If you stay on Arrakis too long, leaving becomes impossible. Then I have 3 days to decide if I trust the guild. You shouldn't, Stilgar said bluntly. The guild serves only profit and political stability. They'd sacrifice anyone to maintain the spice flow and their transport monopoly. But they're also the only ones offering a way home, Chani observed. She'd been silent during the meeting, but her blue eyes had tracked every detail. The Harkonnens want to study him. The Bene Gesserit want to breed him. The Emperor wants him eliminated. The Guild at least offers cooperation, even if the terms are unclear. Vegeta looked across the shield wall toward the deep desert beyond. In 3 days here, he'd learned to respect Arrakis, its harshness, its unforgiving nature, the way it shaped everything that tried to survive on its surface. The Fremen had taught him tactics he'd never considered. Paul had shown him the trap of prescience. Even the sandworms had earned a measure of his acknowledgement. But this wasn't his home. His family was on Earth, in another universe entirely. Trunks was training without his father. Bulma was probably furious at his disappearance, and somewhere, Kakarot was undoubtedly getting stronger in his absence. The thought of that, of Kakarot surpassing him yet again, while Vegeta was trapped on a desert planet playing political games, was intolerable. I'll accept the Guild's offer, Vegeta said. Whatever task they require, I'll complete it. Then they'll send me to Sigma Draconis, and I'll find my way home." "You're sure?" Paul's voice carried the weight of prescient knowledge. "Once you make this deal, the futures I see become even more chaotic. In some, you succeed and return to your universe. In others, you complete the task, but the rift never appears. You're trapped in Sigma Draconis, waiting for a dimensional doorway that may never open. And in still others," he trailed off. "What? What happens in the other futures?" Paul's expression was grave. "In the other futures, the task the Guild assigns requires you to choose between returning home and preventing something terrible. A choice between your personal goals and something larger. I can't see what, exactly. The details blur, but the choice is there in almost every future where you accept the Guild's offer." Vegeta had made similar choices before. On Namek, when he'd fought beside Gohan and Krillin, against Frieza despite his pride. Against Majin Buu, when he'd sacrificed himself to save people he'd once considered beneath notice. Every time, the choice had been agonizing. But those had been choices about Earth, about the universe he'd claimed as home after planet Vegeta's destruction. This was different. These people, the Fremen, the Atreides, even Paul, with his prescient burden, weren't his responsibility. He didn't owe them anything beyond the water debt he'd already honored by fighting beside them. "I'll deal with that choice if it comes," Vegeta said. "Right now, I need a way home. The Guild's offering one, that's enough." Stilgar placed a weathered hand on Vegeta's shoulder, a gesture of respect among the Fremen. "Then you will have 3 days to prepare. Learn what you can. Train with us, and when the time comes to perform this task." His blue eyes held warriors understanding. Fight as Shah Hulu, as one who commands the desert's respect. Win your freedom with honor. They returned to the ornithopter. As the craft lifted into the air, Vegeta looked back at the shield wall one last time. Somewhere beyond it, in the political centers of the Imperium, factions were moving, planning, calculating how to use or eliminate the Outworlder who disrupted their carefully balanced power structures. 3 days. Then he'd discover what task the Guild required. And then, hopefully, he'd finally escape this desert planet and find his way back to the battles that actually mattered. But the spice in his system whispered otherwise. It showed him fragments of possible futures, visions he tried to dismiss but couldn't quite ignore. In them, he saw Arrakis burning. He saw Paul leading armies across the galaxy. He saw himself standing between the Freeman Prophet and something dark and terrible. Prescience as trap, Paul had called it. Seeing futures you couldn't prevent. Being forced to watch yourself walk into disaster despite knowing it was coming. Vegeta had always believed in forging his own destiny through raw power and will. He was about to discover that on Arrakis, destiny had its own ideas about what should happen next. And sometimes, the strongest warrior in the universe couldn't punch his way through fate. The 3 days passed in a blur of training, observation, and growing unease. Vegeta spent his time learning what the Fremen could teach him about desert warfare. Not because he expected to need it, his power transcended most conventional tactics, but because understanding an environment meant controlling it. The Fremen had survived for generations in conditions that would kill ordinary humans within hours. That survival required knowledge worth acquiring. Stilgar taught him the rhythm of the desert, how sandworms responded to vibrations, how to read wind patterns for incoming storms, how to find the rare moisture deposits hidden beneath rock. Chani showed him advanced still-suit maintenance and the intricate water-sharing customs that governed Fremen society. Even the children contributed, demonstrating how to move across sand without creating the distinctive patterns that attracted predators. But it was Paul who provided the most valuable and disturbing information. On the second night, the young prophet found Vegeta on the observation ridge, staring at the stars. Different constellations than Earth's, different stellar arrangements that reminded Vegeta just how far from home he truly was. The spice visions are getting stronger, Paul observed. It wasn't a question. Vegeta didn't deny it. Flashes, possibilities, nothing I can control or understand. It's like someone's showing me pictures of things that haven't happened yet. That's exactly what's happening. The spice awakens prescient capability in those with the genetic potential. Most people never develop it. Their minds can't process the information, but you... Paul sat beside him, also looking at the stars. Your mind is adapting rapidly. Within weeks you might develop full prescience, see the branching futures like I do. I don't want it. Neither did I. Paul's voice carried old pain. I drank the water of life, seeking power to save my family. Instead, I became trapped in my own visions. I see futures where billions die in my name, where jihad spreads across the galaxy like fire. I've tried to prevent it. Every choice I make to avoid that future seems to make it more certain. He looked at Vegeta directly. Prescience isn't power. It's a prison. The more you see, the less free you become. Then I'll resist it. You can't. The spice is in your cells now. Your Saiyan biology might slow the transformation, but it won't stop it. Eventually, you'll see futures whether you want to or not. Paul paused. But there's something else. Something I've seen in my visions that you need to know. More prophecy? A warning. Paul's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The task the Guild will assign you involves my father, Duke Leto Atreides. In most futures, completing the Guild's task means allowing my father to die, possibly even causing his death. Vegeta's attention sharpened. Explain. The details blur. That's how prescience works when Guild navigators are involved. We create blind spots in each other's visions. But the pattern is clear. Baron Harkonnen has set a trap. One that requires my father's death to succeed. The Guild knows about it. They could prevent it, but doing so would destabilize the political balance they've carefully maintained. So they need someone to... Paul's voice caught. To let it happen. To not interfere, when interference would be easy. And they think I'll agree to that? They think you want to go home badly enough that you'll accept any task, no matter the moral cost. They've calculated that your attachment to this universe is minimal. You've been here less than a week. What do you care if one duke dies in a political coup? Paul's eyes held desperate hope. But I'm asking you to care. My father is a good man, one of the few in the Imperium who genuinely believes in justice and honor. His death will trigger the very jihad I'm trying to prevent. Vegeta considered this carefully. He'd met Duke Leto briefly when the Atreides had sent an envoy to the Sietch, a tall man with sad eyes and the bearing of someone carrying immense responsibility. Leto had offered alliance, resources, political protection. Vegeta had refused, not wanting to be drawn deeper into local politics. But he'd also recognized something in Leto, genuine nobility. Not the empty titles and inherited power that defined most rulers Vegeta had met, but actual moral conviction, the kind of leader who put his people's welfare above his own survival, rare, valuable, and apparently doomed. If I refuse the Guild's task, I lose my chance to go home. Vegeta said slowly. Yes, if I accept and let your father die, you think it triggers galactic war? Not think, no. I've seen it in 1,000 futures. My father's death breaks something in me. Makes me embrace the prophecy I've been resisting. I become Muad'Dib in truth, the prophet warrior who leads jihad across the stars. Billions die, planets burn, all because I couldn't save my father. Paul's voice held the weight of prescient certainty. But in the futures where someone intervenes, where my father survives the trap, the jihad doesn't happen, or happens differently, less destructively, there's hope. And you want me to be that intervention. I'm asking you to consider it. When the Guild reveals their task, when you understand what they're really asking you to do, please consider that your choice affects more than just your return home. It affects the future of humanity across the known universe. Vegeta stood, looking down at Paul. The boy, because despite his prescience and political importance, he was still just a boy, stared back with desperate hope. I'll consider it, Vegeta said finally. But understand this. I've sacrificed my own goals for others before, fought battles that weren't mine, protected people I barely knew. And every time, I've lost something irreplaceable, my pride, my position, years I could have spent training and getting stronger, paused. I don't know if I have another sacrifice left in me. Paul nodded slowly. That's fair. I can't ask more than consideration. Just remember that prescience shows possibilities, not certainties. Even if you choose to go home, even if you complete the Guild's task exactly as they want, that doesn't guarantee my father dies. Other factors might intervene. The futures are never as fixed as they appear. You don't sound like you believe that. I don't. Paul's smile was bitter. But I have to hope anyway. Hope is all that separates prescience from madness. On the morning of the third day, the Guild's message arrived. A coded transmission directing Vegeta to coordinates in the deep desert, alone, at sunset. The location was far from any Saiyan, far from Harkonnen patrols, far from anything except sand and rock and the ever-present threat of sandworms. It's a test, Stilgar said, studying the coordinates. They want to see if you can survive the deep desert alone, prove you're capable of whatever task they have in mind. Or it's an ambush, Chani suggested. The Guild claims neutrality, but they have their own agendas. What if they've decided you're too dangerous to let live? This could be an assassination disguised as a meeting. Vegeta appreciated the concern, but both possibilities seemed unlikely. If the Guild wanted to test his survival skills, they'd already witnessed him fight a 400-meter sandworm bare-handed, and if they wanted him dead, they'd need weapons far beyond what conventional forces possessed. I'm going, Vegeta said, alone, as requested. If it's a trap, I'll handle it. If it's legitimate, I'll hear what they have to say. Paul entered the planning chamber, his face showing the strain of sleepless nights spent watching prescient futures. I'll come with you, not to the meeting itself, but close enough to intervene, if necessary. I don't need protection. Not for you, for them. Paul's voice held grim certainty. I've seen futures where you lose control, where the Guild's task infuriates you so much that you destroy their representatives and declare war on the entire organization. In those futures, the Guild retaliates by cutting off all space travel to Arrakis. The planet becomes isolated. Thousands die from supply shortages. The political consequences cascade. You're saying I should control my temper? I'm saying I need to be there to remind you what's at stake. Not just for you, but for everyone on this planet. Paul met his eyes. You're incredibly powerful, Vegeta. But power without restraint is just destruction, and this universe has seen enough destruction. Vegeta wanted to argue, to assert his independence, to reject the notion that he needed a teenage prophet playing chaperone. But he also recognized the wisdom in Paul's concern. He did have a temper. He had destroyed things in anger that he later regretted. Having someone present to provide perspective wasn't weakness. It was tactical awareness. Fine, Vegeta agreed, but you stay out of sight. This is my negotiation. They departed at mid-afternoon, flying a small ornithopter that Chani piloted with expert precision. The journey took them deep into the desert, far beyond any mapped Setch territory, into regions where even Fremen rarely ventured. The landscape became alien, not just sand, but strange rock formations that looked like melted wax, areas where the sand took on colors that suggested mineral deposits, and occasional glimpses of something that might have been ancient ruins, buried by millennia of wind. "This is the deep desert," Chani said as they approached the coordinates, "where Shai Hulud rules absolutely. Only the greatest worm riders come here, those seeking to prove themselves worthy of legend. If the guild chose this location, they want absolute privacy, no witnesses, no records." She set the ornithopter down on a rock plateau 3 kilometers from the meeting coordinates. Paul and Vegeta disembarked while Chani prepared to wait with the aircraft. "Remember," Paul said as they walked toward the coordinates, "whatever they ask, consider the consequences beyond just yourself. Your choices ripple outward in ways you can't predict." "I know." Vegeta's voice was terse. The prescient flashes had been getting worse, more frequent, more vivid. He'd seen fragments of what might happen. Duke Leto in chains, Paul screaming in rage, Fremen armies burning planets, himself standing at a dimensional rift, choosing between home and something he couldn't quite identify. The visions made his head ache and his stomach churn. The spice was changing him. He could feel it happening, his perceptions sharpening, his awareness expanding beyond normal Saiyan capabilities, his mind beginning to process probability clouds instead of simple linear time. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. They reached a point 1 kilometer from the coordinates. Paul stopped, finding shelter behind a rock formation. "I'll wait here. If you need me, I'll know. Prescience has some advantages." Vegeta nodded and continued alone. The meeting location was a natural amphitheater, similar to the one at the shield wall, but smaller, more intimate. And waiting in its center was something that made even Vegeta's warrior instincts scream danger. Not a guild navigator's tank, something much worse, a no-ship. The vessel was ancient, its hull marked with designs that predated the current Imperium. It was also completely invisible to prescient observation. Vegeta knew this instinctively, the same way he knew that Paul couldn't see this moment in his visions. No ships existed outside prescient awareness, making them invisible to guild navigators, Bene Gesserit, and anyone else who relied on seeing the future. The ship's ramp lowered. A figure emerged, not a mutated navigator, a woman, tall, beautiful, with red hair and eyes that held predatory intelligence. She wore clothing that suggested wealth and power. Dark robes with subtle patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Everything about her radiated danger. "Vegeta of the Saiyan," she said, her voice carrying across the amphitheater. "I am Murbella, representative of the Honored Matris." Vegeta's hand instinctively moved to a fighting stance. He'd heard about the Honored Matris from Paul's warnings, a violent matriarchy from the Scattering, fleeing something unknown, conquering through sexual imprinting and biological warfare. They were everything the Bene Gesserit had been, but without restraint or long-term planning, pure predatory dominance. "The Guild sent you?" Vegeta asked, suspicious. "The Guild doesn't know we're here. We intercepted their message, hijacked their meeting." Murbella smiled, a predator's expression. "The Honored Matres have been watching you since you threw Shai Hulud like a child's toy. We're very interested in your capabilities, your genetics, your potential. I've already refused one breeding program. I'm not interested in yours either. We're not asking you to breed. We're asking you to fight." Murbella descended the ramp, moving with fluid grace that suggested superhuman physical conditioning. "The Honored Matres fled the scattering because something hunts us, something powerful enough to destroy entire Honored Mater worlds. We need weapons, allies, forces capable of standing against this threat." "Not my problem. It will be." Murbella's voice carried certainty. "The thing that hunts us will eventually reach the old empire. When it does, every world you've seen, every person you've met, will face extinction. The Bene Gesserit can't stop it. The Guild can't navigate away from it. Even the God Emperor's prescience didn't see it coming. But you..." Her eyes gleamed. "You're from outside this universe, outside the normal rules. You might be exactly what's needed to fight it." Vegeta processed this information rapidly. An existential threat to the entire Imperium, something that terrified the Honored Matres badly enough that they'd fled across the galaxy. And now they wanted to recruit him as a weapon against it. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm about to show you proof." Murbella gestured to the no-ship. "Inside this vessel, we have a captured specimen, one of the weapons our enemy uses. We've kept it contained, studied it, tried to understand how to fight it. You want to know what we're facing? Come aboard, see for yourself." Every instinct told Vegeta this was a trap. The Honored Matres were known for seduction, manipulation, biological control. Stepping onto their ship meant entering their territory, giving them home field advantage. But he was also curious, an enemy powerful enough to make the Honored Matres flee. That suggested a challenge worthy of a Saiyan prince's attention. "No tricks," Vegeta said, moving toward the ramp. "Show me this specimen, then I leave. Understood?" "Perfectly." Murbella's smile suggested she'd already won something. The no-ship's interior was strange. Technology that looked organic, walls that seemed to breathe, lighting that came from sources he couldn't identify. Murbella led him through corridors that twisted in ways that shouldn't be geometrically possible until they reached a containment chamber. Inside a force field that crackled with energy, something waited. It looked almost human, tall, thin, with too many joints and eyes that held nothing remotely resembling human consciousness. Its skin was metallic, shifting colors like oil on water. And when it moved, reality seemed to bend around it, space distorting, light refracting in impossible patterns. "What is it?" Vegeta demanded. "We call them face dancers, but they're not the biological face dancers the Tleilaxu create. These are something else, machines, but machines that think, adapt, evolve, machines that weren't supposed to exist after the Butlerian Jihad." Murbella's voice held genuine fear. "Our enemy creates them, sends them to infiltrate, corrupt, destroy. They can mimic any human perfectly. Appearance, memories, even genetic markers. The only way to detect them is through Honored Matra sexual bonding, and even that isn't reliable." The thing in the containment field turned to look at Vegeta, its too many eyes focused with disconcerting intelligence. "Saiyan," it said, and its voice was wrong, layered, mechanical, like multiple speakers overlapping. "Classification? Unknown. Threat assessment? Maximal. Recommendation? Eliminate immediately. It recognizes you, Murbella said. It shouldn't be possible. We captured this specimen 3 years ago, long before you arrived in this universe. But somehow it knows what you are, knows you're dangerous to its creators. The specimen moved, testing the containment field with mechanical precision. Each movement was calculated, efficient, and utterly inhuman despite the humanoid form. Query: how did organic life form designated Vegeta traverse dimensional barriers, data insufficient, capture required for analysis? Vegeta's key flared involuntarily, a white aura crackling around him in response to perceived threat. The specimen reacted immediately, its form shifting, adapting, becoming something that looked more armored, more combat-ready. Energy signature detected. Biological generation of force field without technological interface. Fascinating. Masters will be pleased. Its masters are the real threat, Murbella explained. An army of thinking machines led by something called Omnius, the same entity that enslaved humanity before the Butlerian Jihad. Somehow it survived, hid in the scattering, grew stronger. Now it's returning to the old empire, with forces sufficient to conquer everything. Vegeta studied the specimen with growing unease. It reminded him uncomfortably of Dr. Gero's androids, artificial beings with combat capability that matched or exceeded organic warriors. If this Omnius had created an army of such things... "Show me it. Fight," Vegeta said. "Excuse me? Drop the containment field. Let it attack me. I want to see what it can actually do." Murbella's expression showed shock. "That's insane. These things are incredibly dangerous. It killed 3 honored matres before we managed to contain it. Then it should make for decent training." Vegeta's smile was predatory. "Drop the field, now." For a moment, Murbella hesitated, then something like respect crossed her face. "Very well. But if it escapes and kills us both, know that I warned you." She touched a control panel. The containment field flickered and died. The specimen moved faster than human eyes could track, crossing the chamber in a blur, its form shifting mid-motion into something with blade-like appendages. It struck at Vegeta's throat with killing precision. Vegeta caught its wrist effortlessly. The blade appendage scraped against his skin without penetrating. The specimen immediately adapted, its form flowing like liquid metal, trying different attack angles, different strike patterns, different configurations. Vegeta studied it with professional interest. Fast, adaptable, intelligent enough to recognize when an attack wasn't working and immediately try something else. But ultimately, limited by physical laws that didn't apply to key-enhanced Saiyan physiology. He crushed the specimen's wrist. The metallic bones crumpled. The thing made no sound of pain, just recalculated, using its free hand to strike at Vegeta's eyes. Vegeta caught that hand, too. Now he held the specimen suspended, unable to escape his grip. Its form continued shifting, trying to find a configuration that could break free, useless against the sheer strength disparity. Interesting technology, Vegeta observed. Adaptive combat systems, self-repair capabilities, probably networked intelligence sharing combat data across units. He looked at Murbella. "Your enemy has thousands of these?" "Millions, possibly billions. They're manufactured in automated facilities hidden throughout the scattering. Each one shares data with the network, making them collectively smarter with every engagement." Murbella's voice held resignation. "The honored matres couldn't fight them. We're biological, limited by training, individual capability, mortality. They're machines, unlimited production, shared learning, no fear or hesitation. We lost." Vegeta tore the specimen's arms off, and tossed them aside. The thing's torso continued trying to attack, appendages sprouting from its chest cavity in desperate adaptation. Vegeta grabbed its head and crushed it like an egg. The specimen went limp. But even destroyed, its components continued moving, trying to reassemble themselves. Only when Vegeta vaporized the remains with a concentrated ki blast did the movement finally stop. "Your enemy can be killed," Vegeta said. "Destroyed. Their adaptive capabilities are impressive, but not unlimited. Sufficient force overwhelming their ability to adapt equals victory. Sufficient force." Morbella's laugh was bitter. "Do you understand the scale? Billions of these things, supported by actual warships, orbital weapons, thinking machine intelligences that can calculate strategy faster than any human mentat. The honored Matras threw entire fleets at them. Planets worth of warriors. It wasn't enough. We couldn't generate sufficient force before they manufactured more than we could destroy." Vegeta understood the problem now. It was a war of attrition that biological forces couldn't win. The machines could replace losses faster than organics could reproduce and train. Each battle taught the machines more about how to fight biological opponents. Eventually, sheer numbers and accumulated combat data would overwhelm any defense, unless someone could decapitate the command structure. "Where is this Omnius?" Vegeta asked. "The central intelligence controlling them?" "Unknown. Somewhere in the scattering, hidden behind layers of defenses and false trails. The honored Matras have been searching for 3 years. Every lead ends in ambush or dead end." Morbella stepped closer, her voice intense. "But you might be able to find it. Your energy signature, your ki, doesn't register on their sensors the way normal biological life does. You could potentially infiltrate locations where we can't. Reach Omnius when we can't. Destroy what we can't." "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for the dimensional rift coordinates you seek." Morbella's smile returned. "Yes, we know about your meeting with Navigator Edric. We know about Sigma Draconis. We even know the Guild's true task. They want you to allow Duke Leto's assassination to maintain political balance. But we're offering something better." She activated a holographic display. It showed stellar coordinates, energy signatures, and complex calculations that Vegeta couldn't fully comprehend, but recognized as navigation data. The honored Matras have studied dimensional phenomena for years. Part of our flight from Omnius involved exploring unusual space. We found 3 naturally occurring dimensional rifts. One of them leads to your universe. We've confirmed the resonance pattern matches your pod's signature. We can take you there right now, today. No tasks, no conditions. Just transport you to the rift and let you go home. Vegeta's heart rate increased. Home. Right now. No political games, no impossible tasks, no sacrificing other people's futures. Just a direct route back to Earth, to his family, to the life he'd been pulled away from. It was everything he wanted. "What's the catch?" Vegeta asked, suspicious. "The catch is that you'd be leaving this universe to its fate. Omnius will eventually reach the old empire. Without someone capable of fighting these machines at your level, the Imperium falls. Trillions die. Everything you've seen, the Fremen, the Atreides, even the political factions you despise, all of it gets conquered or destroyed." Morbella's voice softened. "Or you could stay, help us find Omnius, destroy it. Save this universe from mechanical extinction. Then we take you to the rift. You go home knowing you prevented genocide." "How long would that take?" "Unknown. Months, maybe years. But we'd support you completely. Resources, intelligence, whatever you need. The honored Matras may be fleeing, but we're not weak. We have technology, warriors, knowledge. With your power and our support, we might actually win." Vegeta looked at the holographic display showing the path home. So close, so temptingly immediate. Then he thought about Paul's warning, Duke Leto's impending death, the jihad that Paul saw in his visions, the billions who would die if certain futures came to pass. And now this, a mechanical army threatening to conquer the entire Imperium, another threat. Another crisis that wasn't his responsibility. He'd spent his life fighting other people's battles, defeating threats to planets he'd initially intended to conquer, sacrificing his pride and goals for the sake of universes that had never asked for his protection. But he'd also learned something from those battles. From Gohan's sacrifice against Cell. From Goku's willingness to die repeatedly for Earth's sake. From Trunks' desperate time travel to prevent android apocalypse. Sometimes being strong meant more than just personal victory. Sometimes it meant bearing burdens that weren't yours because you were the only one strong enough to carry them. "I need to think," Vegeta said finally. "You have until sunrise," Morbella replied. "After that, the no-ship leaves, with or without you. The rift won't wait forever. Dimensional barriers shift. This opportunity might not come again." Vegeta nodded and walked back through the impossible corridors, emerging into the desert night. The twin moons cast silver light across the sand, and the stars wheeled overhead in patterns that still looked alien to his Earth-trained eyes. Behind him, the no-ship waited with its promise of immediate escape. Ahead, somewhere in the desert, Paul waited with his burden of prescient visions and desperate hope that someone would save his father. And everywhere, the spice whispered possibilities, futures, branching in every direction, paths that led home, paths that led to war, paths that ended in triumph or disaster or something in between. Vegeta had always believed in forging his own destiny, but on Arrakis, in this strange universe of prescience and prophecy, he was learning that sometimes destiny had its own momentum, and the strongest warrior in the universe still had to choose which battles to fight. He had until sunrise to make that choice. Vegeta found Paul exactly where he'd left him, sheltered behind the rock formation, his blue-within-blue eyes reflecting moonlight. The young prophet looked exhausted. Prescience apparently took its toll even on those born to it. "You saw the meeting," Vegeta said. It wasn't a question. Not directly. The no-ship blocks prescient observation. That's its entire purpose. But I saw the moments before and after, saw you walking into darkness and emerging from it changed. Paul's voice held quiet concern. "What did they offer you?" Vegeta sat on the rock, looking out across the moonlit desert. "Everything. A path home, right now. No conditions except leaving your universe to its fate." "Omnius." Paul's expression tightened. "I've seen fragments of that future in my deepest visions, the ones I try not to look at because they're so terrible. Machines conquering everything. The spice flow interrupted, humanity reduced to slaves or resources, the Guild, the Bene Gesserit, even the Fremen, all extinct or assimilated. It's one of the darkest possible futures. The honored Matras want me to help stop it. And the price is staying here, abandoning your home, fighting a war that could take years." Paul studied Vegeta's face in the moonlight. "I can't see your decision. Whatever you choose exists in my blind spot. But I can see the consequences radiating outward. If you leave now, if you take their offer and go home, the darkness comes. Not immediately, but inevitably. Omnius reaches the old empire within a decade. Everything falls. And if I stay, the futures branch wildly. In some, you destroy Omnius and save the Imperium. In others, you die trying. In still others, you succeed, but the cost is so high that you wish you'd died." Paul's voice held the weight of prescient knowledge. But there's also the Guild's task, the choice about my father. That decision point still exists, sitting in the timeline like a nexus. Two different crises, two different choices, both demanding you sacrifice your own goals. Vegeta's hands clenched. I'm tired of sacrifice. I've spent my entire life giving up what I want for the sake of others, fighting battles that weren't mine, protecting people who never asked for protection, and every time I lose something, pride, time, opportunities to become stronger. Now this universe wants more of the same. Abandon my family, fight your wars, become your champion. I know it's unfair, Paul said quietly. You didn't ask to crash here. Didn't volunteer to become entangled in Imperium politics, the Saiyan prince who just wanted to train and get stronger. You have every right to go home and let us deal with our own problems. But you're here, and you're capable of things we're not. And sometimes being stronger means bearing burdens others can't. Paul's voice hardened slightly. My father taught me that. He rules Arrakis knowing it will probably kill him. The Fremen live with water discipline knowing a single mistake means death. Strength isn't just power. It's responsibility for what that power can prevent. Vegeta wanted to reject the argument. It sounded too much like Goku's naive heroism, like Gohan's self-sacrificing nobility, the kind of thinking that got warriors killed while weaker beings lived on. But it also sounded like something Trunks might say. His son, who'd traveled through time to prevent android apocalypse, who'd put himself at risk repeatedly to save a timeline that wasn't even his own. Trunks had inherited Saiyan pride, but he'd also inherited something else, the willingness to fight for others even when it cost him everything. The spice is showing me things, Vegeta said finally. Visions, possible futures. I see myself fighting machines in the void. I see you leading armies. I see... He paused, struggling with the prescient imagery. I see a choice, not the one about your father or Omnius. Something else, something bigger. A moment where I have to decide between power and principle, and in every vision where I choose power, I become something I despise. Prescience shows you what you need to see, Paul said. Not always what will happen, but what could happen, the paths that matter most to your core being. He looked at Vegeta directly. What does your core being want, Vegeta? Really want? Beneath the pride and the need to prove yourself stronger than Kakarot? Vegeta considered the question honestly. What did he want? To go home, to see Bulma and Trunks, to continue training to surpass Goku, to achieve the next level of Super Saiyan, to live the life of a warrior without political complications or moral dilemmas, but also to be worthy of that life. To be someone his son could respect. To prove that Saiyan pride meant more than just strength. That it meant honor, integrity, the willingness to fight for what mattered even when it cost everything. He'd learned that lesson slowly, painfully, over decades of battles, Cell, Buu. Every enemy that had forced him to grow beyond mere power-seeking. Every moment where he'd chosen to protect others, instead of pursuing his own goals. The Saiyan prince who'd arrived on Arrakis would have taken the honored Maître's offer without hesitation, gone home. Let this universe burn, felt no guilt about it. But Vegeta had changed, was still changing. The man who'd sacrificed himself against Buu, who'd hugged his son for the first time in years before that sacrifice, couldn't take the easy path anymore. Not without becoming something he'd worked too hard to evolve beyond. Damn it, Vegeta muttered. I'm going to stay, aren't I? Paul's expression showed relief. You're going to make your own choice. Whatever that is, I'll respect it. Don't patronize me with respect. I know what has to happen." Vegeta stood, looking back toward where the no-ship waited in the darkness. "The Honored Matras want me to fight Omnius. Fine, I'll fight. But first, I deal with the Guild's task, your father's situation. Because if I'm staying in this universe, I'm not letting a good man die in some political scheme just to maintain balance. The Guild won't like that. They'll see it as breach of contract. The Guild can go to hell. I never agreed to their terms anyway. I just let them think I was considering it." Vegeta's voice hardened with decision. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to find out the details of this trap against Duke Leto. I'm going to prevent it, not for your sake, but because letting good people die for political convenience is exactly the kind of weakness I despise. Then I'm going to hunt down this Omnius and destroy it. And after all that's done, the Honored Matras are going to take me to that dimensional rift like they promised, or I'll tear their organization apart until they comply." Paul studied him for a long moment. "You know the Honored Matras might not honor that deal. They're not known for keeping promises. Then I'll make them regret breaking it." Vegeta's ki flared slightly, white energy crackling around him. "I'm done being manipulated by political factions and prophecies. I'm staying on my terms, fighting my way, and anyone who tries to control or trick me will learn what happens when you anger a Saiyan prince." For the first time since Vegeta had met him, Paul smiled, genuinely smiled. That might be exactly what this universe needs. Not another prophet or politician, but someone too stubborn to be controlled by prescience or manipulation, someone who makes their own rules. Damn right. Vegeta started walking back toward where Chani waited with the ornithopter. "Come on. We need to get back to the Sietch and start planning. How much time do we have before this trap against your father springs?" Paul followed, his prescient eyes already seeing futures, shifting, branching, becoming chaotic around Vegeta's decision. Days, maybe a week. The Baron is moving pieces into position. The Emperor's Sardaukar are preparing. Even the Bene Gesserit have agents ready to capitalize on the chaos. Then we move faster than they expect. The element of surprise is the one advantage they haven't planned for. Me actually giving a damn about local politics. Vegeta glanced back at Paul. "You're sure your father is worth saving? I'm not risking my life for some political figurehead who's as corrupt as the rest. My father is the best man I've ever known," Paul said with absolute conviction. "He believes in justice, honor, protecting the innocent. He came to Arrakis knowing it was a trap, knowing the Baron wanted him dead, because refusing would have meant war that would kill millions. He chose to risk himself rather than let others suffer. That's who you're saving." Vegeta grunted acknowledgement. It was the kind of noble stupidity he'd expect from someone like Goku, walking into danger to protect others. The kind of behavior that should get you killed, but somehow inspired loyalty and respect that transcended rational calculation. The kind of behavior that, despite his cynicism, Vegeta had learned to respect. They reached the ornithopter. Chani looked up from maintenance work, immediately reading the decision in their faces. "You're staying," she said simply, "temporarily, until I've dealt with the threats facing this universe. Then I'm leaving, and no force in existence will stop me." Vegeta climbed into the aircraft. "But while I'm here, I might as well make myself useful, starting with preventing whatever trap the Harkonnens have set." Chani's blue eyes showed something like approval. "The Fremen will support you. We don't forget those who fight beside us, and anyone who opposes Harkonnen treachery has Sietch Taber's loyalty." The ornithopter lifted into the night sky, its insect wings beating rhythmically. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, and somewhere in its depths, the no-ship waited for Vegeta's answer. He'd given it, not to the honored maîtres, but to himself. Stay, fight, win. Then go home. Simple plan, impossible execution. Exactly the kind of challenge a Saiyan prince understood. The spice visions flickered at the edge of his consciousness, futures branching wildly now that his decision was made. He saw Duke Leto alive and commanding respect. He saw Baron Harkonnen's face twisted in fury. He saw machines burning in the void. He saw himself standing at a dimensional rift, looking back at a universe he'd saved. And in one vision, just one, brief and bright, he saw Trunks' smile when his father finally came home. That vision mattered more than all the others combined. "Tell me everything about this trap," Vegeta said to Paul. "Every detail you've seen, every faction involved, every piece in play. If I'm going to disrupt prophecy and prescience, I need to know exactly what I'm disrupting." Paul began explaining, his voice steady, despite the exhaustion of prescient observation. The trap was complex, layers within layers, contingencies upon contingencies. Baron Harkonnen had spent years planning it. The Emperor's support made it nearly impossible to prevent without triggering political crisis. The Bene Gesserit had agents positioned to benefit from either outcome. It was the kind of intricate political assassination that should have been unstoppable. Should have been. But none of the conspirators had planned for a Saiyan warrior who didn't care about political consequences, who had power sufficient to ignore conventional wisdom, who was angry enough at being manipulated that he'd tear apart their careful schemes, just to prove no one controlled him. The flight back to the Sietch took 2 hours. Vegeta spent the entire time absorbing information, planning strategy, and preparing for the kind of fight that didn't involve merely throwing punches. Political warfare, tactical disruption, asymmetric response to conspiracy. The desert had taught him patience. The Freeman had taught him strategy. Paul's warnings had taught him consequences. Now it was time to apply those lessons to protecting someone worth protecting and destroying schemes that deserved destruction. The Baron thought he had the perfect plan. He was about to discover that perfection shattered when confronted with someone who refused to follow the rules, and Vegeta had never been good at following rules. The attack on Duke Leto Atreides came 3 days later, exactly as Paul's prescient visions had warned. But the conspirators discovered that prescience had limits when someone refused to follow the predicted paths. Dr. Wellington Yue, the Suk Doctor, whose imperial conditioning should have made betrayal impossible, had been the perfect infiltrator. The Baron had broken him through simple cruelty, capturing his Bene Gesserit wife, torturing her, offering Yue a devil's bargain. Betrayed Duke Leto, and she dies quickly, mercifully. Refuse, and her suffering continues indefinitely. Yue had chosen mercy. He'd disabled the Atreides' shields, allowed Harkonnen forces to infiltrate the palace, planted a false tooth filled with poison gas in Duke Leto's mouth, with instructions to use it on the Baron. A final act of revenge that would at least take Harkonnen down with him. It was elegant, tragic, inevitable in every future Paul had seen. Except Vegeta didn't believe in inevitability. He'd spent the 3 days learning everything about Arrakis Palace security, Atreides' military disposition, and Harkonnen assault patterns. Stilgar had provided intelligence gathered over decades of Fremen observation. Chani had mapped every entrance and weak point. Paul had described the prescient visions in excruciating detail. And Vegeta had waited, invisible in the shadows outside Dr. Yue's quarters, for the moment when the doctor would make his fateful choice. It came at midnight. Yue emerged from his chamber carrying a medical bag, the kind used for house calls to noble patients. His face showed the hollow resignation of someone who'd already died inside. Vegeta dropped from the ceiling, landing silently behind him. "Going somewhere, Doctor?" Yue spun, his hand instinctively reaching for something in his robe. A weapon? A suicide pill? Vegeta moved faster than human reflexes could track, grabbing the doctor's wrist before he could complete the motion. "Who? What?" Yue's eyes widened as he recognized Vegeta from the reports that had circulated through Arrakis. "The Outworlder. But how did you know?" "I know everything." Vegeta's voice was cold as desert night. "I know about your wife, about the Baron's torture, about the choice he forced you to make. I know you're about to disable the shields and let Harkonnen forces infiltrate. I know about the poison tooth." Yue's face went pale. "Then you must stop me. Alert the Duke. I'm compromised. My conditioning is broken. I'll betray everything even though I don't want to." "Or," Vegeta interrupted, "we use the Baron's trap against him, let him think his plan is working while we spring our own surprise." Yue stared at him. "You can't be suggesting—" "I'm suggesting you do exactly what you planned. Disable the shields, let the Harkonnens enter, take Duke Leto to them." Vegeta's smile was predatory. "But first, you're going to tell me every detail of the Baron's plan, every force involved, every timeline, every contingency. Because I'm going to be there when the trap springs, and the Baron is going to learn what happens when you try to manipulate a Saiyan prince. This is insane. Even if you're as powerful as the reports claim, the Harkonnens are bringing hundreds of soldiers, Sardaukar support, overwhelming force. One warrior can't—" Vegeta's ki flared, white energy crackling around him, invisible waves. The hallway's glow globes flickered, the stone walls vibrated. Yue stumbled backward from the sheer pressure of contained power. "I'm not one warrior," Vegeta said quietly. "I'm the finest warrior my universe has ever produced. I've destroyed planets, fought gods, survived extinction-level threats. Your Baron and his Sardaukar are insects. The only question is whether I crush them quickly or take my time." Yue's scientific mind processed what he was witnessing. Energy generation without technology, power that defied every physical law he understood. "You're serious? You actually think you can face the entire Harkonnen assault force alone?" "I know I can. The question is whether you're brave enough to help me do it in a way that saves your wife." That caught Yue's attention. "My wife is dead. The Baron told me." "The Baron lied. Paul's prescience shows her alive, imprisoned on Giddy Prime, leverage to ensure your continued cooperation after this mission. If you help me now, I'll retrieve her, break her free, reunite you before the Baron realizes his plan failed." Vegeta leaned closer. "But only if you trust me, right now, this moment. Give me the details. Help me infiltrate their operation, and I'll give you back everything the Baron took." Yue's hands trembled, hope warred with despair on his face. "If you're lying, if this is some trick—" "I don't lie about combat. I don't need to." Vegeta released Yue's wrist. "You have 30 seconds to decide. Help me, or I knock you unconscious and handle this my way. Either approach works, but only one saves your wife." Yue looked at the medical bag in his hand, at the palace where Duke Leto slept, trusting the doctor whose conditioning should have been unbreakable, at the Outworlder who radiated enough power to make the air itself vibrate. "What do you need to know?" Yue asked quietly. The Harkonnen assault began at 0300 hours, exactly as planned. Dr. Yue disabled the Atreides' defensive shields using his medical access codes. Harkonnen forces infiltrated through carefully mapped weak points. Sardaukar, in unmarked armor, moved with deadly efficiency, eliminating Atreides' guards before they could raise alarms. Duke Leto Atreides was captured in his bedchamber, drugged by the loyal doctor he'd trusted, bound, gagged, the poison tooth planted carefully in his mouth with whispered instructions for revenge. Everything proceeded according to Baron Vladimir Harkonnen's meticulous plan, until Duke Leto was brought to the throne room where the Baron waited. The Baron floated in his suspensor field, grotesque body hovering above the Atreides' throne like a mockery of authority. Feyd-Rautha stood beside him, beautiful and deadly. 50 Harkonnen soldiers lined the walls. 20 Sardaukar held strategic positions. Peter de Vries, the twisted mentat, calculated probabilities with sappho-stained lips curved in anticipation. Dr. Yue dragged Duke Leto forward, the Duke's eyes showing fury and betrayal at the trusted doctor's treachery. Magnificent, the Baron purred. Years of planning, decades of positioning, and now, Duke Leto Atreides, the people's duke, the honorable fool who thought ethics could defeat politics. He gestured grandly. "Remove his gag. Let him speak his final words before I kill him slowly." A Harkonnen soldier reached for the gag. That's when Vegeta materialized in the center of the throne room. No dramatic entrance, no warning. One moment empty space, the next a Saiyan warrior standing with arms crossed, white aura flickering around him like contained lightning. Every weapon in the room immediately targeted him. Lasguns charged, Mola pistols aimed. Sardaukar moved into attack formations with practiced precision. "Who?" the Baron began. "The Outworlder." Peter's mentat mind processed the situation instantly. Threat assessment, maximal, recommendation, kill immediately with overwhelming force. The Sardaukar opened fire, projectile weapons, carefully chosen to avoid lasgun shield catastrophes, hundreds of rounds per second, coordinated crossfire that would have liquefied any normal target. The bullets stopped in midair, caught in Vegeta's key field. They hung suspended for a moment, a sphere of frozen death, then dropped harmlessly to the floor with musical tinkling sounds. Silence fell across the throne room. "You've made a mistake," Vegeta said quietly, his voice carrying to every corner despite the low volume. "You schemed, you planned, you broke a good man through torture and forced a doctor to betray his oath. All for political power and spice monopoly." His eyes found the Baron. "I'm here to teach you what happens when insects try to devour lions." "Kill him!" the Baron shrieked. "All of you, kill him now!" The Sardaukar moved as one, the finest soldiers in the Imperium, each worth 10 normal troops, trained on a prison planet that made Arrakis look hospitable. They attacked with the coordinated efficiency that had conquered planets. Vegeta moved faster than human eyes could track. The first Sardaukar died before he registered movement, a single punch that caved in his chest despite body armor that could stop anti-tank rounds. The second lost his head to a backhand strike. The third through eighth were thrown through stone walls with impacts that shook the palace foundations. 10 seconds, 20 Sardaukar dead or incapacitated. The Harkonnen soldiers broke ranks and fled, not from cowardice, from rational assessment that whatever stood before them transcended military capability. You didn't fight natural disasters. You survived them, if possible. Feyd-Rautha drew his blade and charged, more from pride than tactical sense. He was fast, trained by the finest instructors House Harkonnen could provide. His blade sought Vegeta's throat with poisoned precision. Vegeta caught the blade between two fingers and snapped it like a twig. Then he grabbed Feyd-Rautha by the throat and slammed him into the floor hard enough to crack stone. Not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to remove him from the fight and demonstrate the futility of resistance. "Stay down," Vegeta advised. "You're better than most. That means you deserve to live. Don't make me change my mind." Feyd-Rautha, choking and broken, had enough sense to remain motionless. Peter de Vries activated his backup plan. Chemical weapons hidden throughout the throne room, nerve agents that would kill everyone present, but might at least eliminate the threat. His twisted mentat mind calculated acceptable losses. Vegeta's ki blast vaporized the canisters before they could deploy. The explosion shook the palace, but the deadly chemicals burned harmlessly in the heat of contained energy. Now only the Baron remained, floating in his suspensor field, his grotesque face showing emotions that cycled through rage, fear, and desperate calculation. "You can't kill me," the Baron said, voice steadying with false confidence. "I'm a great house leader, protected by the Great Convention. The Emperor himself guarantees my safety. Kill me, and you'll face atomics, guild sanctions, Bene Gesserit retaliation. I don't care about your political protections." Vegeta rose into the air, floating at the Baron's level through pure ki manipulation. "You tortured an innocent woman to break her husband. You tried to murder a good man through treachery. You've enslaved Arrakis for profit while people die in the desert." He moved closer until he was face to face with the floating monstrosity. "But I'm not going to kill you. That would be too quick." "Then what?" Vegeta grabbed the Baron's suspensor field controls and crushed them. The anti-gravity effect died instantly. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who weighed over 300 kilograms through genetic disease and deliberate excess, crashed to the floor under his own weight. The Baron screamed as bones cracked under the sudden restoration of gravity. His body, unable to support itself without technological aid, collapsed into a heap of pain and helpless fury. "You're going to live," Vegeta said, descending to stand over him. "Live to face Duke Leto's justice, face the Emperor's judgment for violating the Great Convention through your use of Sardaukar in unmarked armor. Face the Guild's sanctions for attempting to disrupt the spice flow through political assassination." He leaned down, voice dropping to something cold and final. "And you're going to release Dr. Yue's wife immediately. Have her transported here, unharmed, or I'll come to Gidi Prime and dismantle your fortress stone by stone while you watch." Dr. Yue had moved to Duke Leto during the chaos, removing his restraints and carefully extracting the poisoned tooth. The Duke stood now, rubbing his wrists, his eyes showing shock at the carnage around him. "You saved my life," Duke Leto said to Vegeta. "Why? We barely know each other. You owe House Atreides nothing." "I owe your son a favor. He asked me to consider preventing your death. I considered it, decided a universe with fewer scheming politicians and more honorable leaders might be worth preserving." Vegeta glanced at the Baron, who whimpered in his puddle of broken suspensors. "Besides, I needed to send a message to every faction that's been trying to manipulate me. This is what happens when you mistake a Saiyan prince for a chess piece." Paul entered the throne room, followed by Stilgar, Chani, and a force of Fremen warriors who'd infiltrated during the chaos. The young prophet looked at the carnage, dead Sardaukar, unconscious Harkonnen soldiers, the Baron broken and helpless, and smiled. "The futures are branching differently now," Paul said. "This moment, your intervention, has changed everything. The jihad I feared. I can't see it clearly anymore. Too many variables, Too much chaos around your actions. He met Vegeta's eyes. Thank you. You've given me something I thought impossible. Hope that the terrible future might be avoided. Don't thank me yet. I still have to deal with Omnius and his machine army. That's going to make this throne room brawl look like a sparring match. Vegeta turned to Duke Leto. Your planet is secure. Your life is preserved. But the larger threats remain. The Honored Matras are fleeing something that can destroy the entire Imperium. I'm going to stop it. After that, I'm going home. What you do with your political power is your concern. Duke Leto straightened, his natural authority reasserting itself despite the chaos. Then House Atreides owes you a blood debt. Whatever resources you need for this campaign against Omnius, you'll have them, ships, intelligence, weapons, fighters, the full support of a great house. I work alone. Then you'll work alone with the best equipment we can provide. Duke Leto's voice carried the same conviction that had made him beloved by his people. My son sees something in you, Outworlder, something worth trusting. I've learned to trust his visions. You've earned House Atreides' loyalty today. We don't forget such debts. Vegeta grunted acknowledgement. The political complications were annoying, but having resources for the fight against Omnius was pragmatic. He'd learned enough about this universe to know that even overwhelming personal power required logistical support for campaigns across multiple star systems. Fine, we'll coordinate later. Right now, I have to meet with the Honored Matras and accept their mission. They're waiting for my answer. Vegeta looked at Paul. Watch the Baron. Make sure he releases Yue's wife, and if any faction tries to retaliate for what happened here tonight, remind them what happened to the last group that thought they could manipulate me. It will be done. Paul's prescient eyes already saw futures where word of tonight's battle spread across the Imperium, where every faction recalculated their approach to the Outworlder who'd casually demolished Sardaukar and humiliated a great house. You've changed the political landscape, Vegeta. Every power in the known universe will want to either recruit or eliminate you now. Good. Let them want. Wanting and achieving are very different things. Vegeta's ki flared as he prepared to depart. I'll return when I've dealt with Omnius. Until then, survive without me. You're all smart enough to handle local politics without a Saiyan babysitter. He launched into the air, tearing through the palace ceiling and into the desert night sky. The twin moons cast silver light across Arrakis as he flew toward the coordinates where the no-ship waited. Behind him, in the throne room, Duke Leto surveyed the damage and the prisoners. His reign on Arrakis had nearly ended before it truly began. Now, through the intervention of an Outworlder who'd crashed here by accident, he had a second chance. Stilgar, Duke Leto said to the Fremen Naib, help me understand what just happened. What is Vegeta? Stilgar's weathered face showed the expression of someone who'd witnessed something beyond normal comprehension. He is Shah Hulu, my duke. One who commands the desert's respect. One who fights Shai-Hulud bare-handed and throws aside schemes like children's toys. He paused, choosing his words carefully. He is also the most dangerous being I've ever encountered, and I thank Shai-Hulud that he chose to fight beside us rather than against us. Paul looked through the ceiling hole where Vegeta had departed, his prescient eyes tracking futures that spiraled outward in chaotic patterns. He'll face Omnius soon, battle something that destroyed Honored Matra worlds, fight machines that learn from every engagement. His voice held quiet certainty. And somehow, despite prescience telling me it's impossible, I think he might actually win. Vegeta reached the no-ship as dawn broke over the desert. Murbella waited at the bottom of the ramp, her predatory smile suggesting she'd known he would come. "I accept your mission," Vegeta said without preamble. "Take me to Omnius. I'll destroy your enemy. Then you'll take me to the dimensional rift like you promised. Those are my terms." "And the Imperium? Duke Leto? Your new allies?" "Saved, protected, alive to handle their own problems." Vegeta's voice carried absolute confidence. "Your machines are the real threat. Everything else is just politics. I'll deal with the existential danger, then go home. Simple." Murbella studied him for a long moment. "You really think you can destroy Omnius? An entity that's conquered hundreds of worlds, that commands billions of adaptive combat machines? I know I can, because unlike everyone else in this universe, I don't rely on prescience or political schemes or genetic breeding programs. I rely on power, raw, absolute, overwhelming power." Vegeta's ki flared, visible in the dawn light. "Your machines learn from combat data. They adapt to tactics. They optimize strategies. But they've never faced someone who can simply overpower their adaptation. Someone whose strength exceeds their ability to calculate. Someone who fights not with technology or foresight, but with will and energy that transcends their programming." "Hubris," Murbella observed. "The belief that personal power can overcome systematic advantage. Not hubris, experience." Vegeta mounted the ramp. "I've destroyed beings that gods feared, fought battles that determined the fate of universes. Your machine intelligence is impressive by this universe's standards. By mine, it's just another obstacle. Now take me to it, so I can eliminate the threat and get on with finding my way home." Murbella's smile widened. "Very well. Vegeta of the Saiyan, the honored matress will take you to war. But understand this, if you fail, if Omnius defeats or corrupts you, we will not attempt rescue. You'll be alone against an enemy that has never known defeat." "I'm always alone," Vegeta replied. "That's what makes me strong." The no-ship sealed its ramp and lifted silently into the sky. Within moments, it had left Arrakis orbit, beginning the journey toward the scattering and the war that waited beyond the Imperium's borders. On the desert below, the Fremen watched the impossible ship disappear. Paul Atreides stood among them, his prescient eyes trying to follow Vegeta's path into futures that refused to resolve. The spice whispered possibilities: victory, defeat, sacrifice, triumph, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Will he succeed?" Chani asked quietly. "I don't know," Paul admitted. "For the first time since I drank the water of life, I honestly don't know. His future exists outside my visions. He's chaos incarnate, unpredictable, unstoppable, impossible to manipulate or foresee." He smiled slightly. "Which might be exactly what this universe needs. Not another prophet bound by visions of terrible futures, but a warrior who makes his own destiny regardless of what prescience says should happen." Stilgar grunted agreement. The desert tests all who walk upon it. It tested Vegeta and found him worthy. Now the universe beyond the desert will test him. May Shai Hulud guide his path, even in places where the Great Maker cannot reach. The twin suns rose higher, burning away the last shadows of night. Arrakis continued its eternal cycle: heat, sand, spice, and survival. The political landscape had shifted violently in a single night, but the desert remained unchanged, patient, eternal. And somewhere in the deep sand, a sandworm moved, its ancient consciousness registering the departure of the strange warrior who had fought it to a standstill. The worm remembered. The desert remembered. Vegeta, prince of all Saiyans, had come to Arrakis by accident. He'd learned its ways, earned its respect, and changed its political future. Now he departed to face a threat that had destroyed worlds, to fight a war that wasn't his, to risk everything for a universe that had trapped him against his will. But he departed with purpose, with determination, with the absolute conviction that he would win, save this universe, and find his way home to the family waiting for him across dimensional barriers. The spice must flow, the desert must endure, and the warrior must fight. These were the eternal truths of Arrakis, and Vegeta had learned them all. The legend of Vegeta the Outworlder spread across Arrakis like spice carried on desert wind. The Fremen told stories in their sketches, how Shah Hulud had thrown Shai Hulud like a toy, how he'd saved Duke Leto from Harkonnen treachery, how he'd defeated 20 Sardaukar with bare hands. Children played games where they pretended to fly without wings, to catch bullets in mid-air, to speak with the absolute confidence of someone who feared nothing the universe could produce. The great houses whispered in their council chambers about the political implications. House Atreides, ascendant. House Harkonnen, humiliated. The delicate balance of Imperium power disrupted by an outworlder who cared nothing for their careful schemes. Some plotted revenge, others sought alliance. All understood that the rules had changed when someone powerful enough to ignore prescience and politics entered their game. The Bene Gesserit added Vegeta to their breeding projections as an uncontrolled variable. Impossible to predict, impossible to manipulate, impossible to incorporate. Reverend Mother Mohiam reported to the Sisterhood that the Outworlder represented either humanity's salvation or its doom, and not even the spice could reveal which. The Spacing Guild navigators watched futures branch chaotically around Vegeta's path, their prescient visions clouded by his presence in probability space. They calculated that his campaign against Omnius had a 31% chance of success, 47% chance of death, and 22% chance of outcomes so strange they defied categorization. And Paul Atreides, Muad'Dib, prophet of the desert, stood on his father's palace balcony and looked toward the stars where Vegeta had vanished. The terrible future he'd feared, the jihad that would kill billions in his name, had begun to fade from his visions, not gone, but muted, uncertain, changed by the intervention of someone who refused to accept destiny. "Thank you," Paul whispered to the empty sky, "for showing me that prescience isn't absolute, that can overcome fate, that someone strong enough doesn't need to be trapped by visions of terrible futures." Duke Leto joined his son on the balcony, thinking about the Outworlder, thinking about what he represents, freedom from the trap of foresight, the courage to fight battles that aren't yours because they need fighting. Paul looked at his father. He could have gone home, taken the easy path, let us handle our own problems. Instead, he stayed, saved you, took on a war against machines that have destroyed worlds, all while knowing he might never make it home. "That's honor," Duke Leto said quietly, "the kind that transcends politics and self-interest, rare in the Imperium, precious beyond spice." He placed a hand on Paul's shoulder. "If we survive what's coming, the Guild's machinations, the Harkonnen revenge plots, the Emperor's suspicions, it will be because one Outworlder chose to fight for people he barely knew, in a universe that trapped him against his will." Paul nodded. "I've seen fragments of his battle with Omnius. The visions are unclear, too much chaos, too much quantum uncertainty. But I see him standing against darkness, fighting alone against overwhelming odds, refusing to yield even when prescience would say defeat is certain." He smiled slightly, very Saiyan of him. "Will he win? I don't know. For once, I genuinely don't know." Paul's voice held something like relief. "And that's the greatest gift he could have given me. proof that the future isn't fixed, that will and power and stubborn determination can overcome even prescient certainty. Whatever happens to Vegeta, whatever he faces in the war against Omnius, he's already won something important. He's shown us that prophecy can be broken. On the desert below, the Fremen conducted their daily rituals: water discipline, still-suit maintenance, worm-riding lessons for the young, spice harvesting in the eternal dance with Shai Hulud. Life continued as it had for generations, with one difference. Now the people whispered about possibilities beyond prophecy, about changes that even prescients hadn't foreseen, about the Outworlder who'd proven that strength could rewrite destiny. And in the deep desert, where the greatest sandworms dwelled, something ancient stirred. The worms didn't think in human terms, didn't understand politics or prophecy or dimensional barriers, but they remembered. They always remembered. They remembered the warrior who'd fought one of their kind and shown respect in battle, who'd learned the desert's lessons and earned Shah Hulu status through combat and survival, who'd departed to fight enemies beyond the sand's reach. If Vegeta returned, the desert would welcome him. The worms would acknowledge him. The Freemen would honor him. And if he didn't return, if the war against Omnius consumed him, the desert would remember his name in the oral traditions passed down through generations. The Outworlder who changed everything, the warrior who broke prophecy, the Saiyan prince who chose sacrifice over escape. Either way, Arrakis had been transformed by his presence. The spice continued to flow. The desert continued to test all who walked upon it. The political games continued in palace courts and guild chambers and Bene Gesserit sanctuaries. But now, in the deep desert where only the strongest survived, there was a new legend. The legend of Vegeta, Shah Hulu, who proved that even in a universe of prescience and prophecy, will could forge new destinies. The legend of a warrior who fought not for glory or conquest, but for honor, and the simple belief that good people deserved protection. The legend of a Saiyan prince who'd crashed on Arrakis by accident and left it by choice, having changed the course of galactic history in a single week. The spice must flow. The desert must endure. The legends must grow. And somewhere beyond the stars, in battles yet to be witnessed, Vegeta fought on. Alone against impossible odds, refusing to yield, determined to win, save this universe, and finally find his way home. The desert had tested him and found him worthy. Now the cosmos would test him, and the sands of Arrakis awaited his return.